When the gunfire started that Tuesday morning, Evan Hale had exactly 3 seconds to decide between the man he used to be and the father he'd promised to become. 3 seconds to watch a cop bleed out in the street. 3 seconds to feel his daughter's eyes burning into his back. 3 seconds before the whole city learned that some debts never get paid, some secrets never stay buried, and some men can't run far enough from who they really are. This is the story of how one bullet changed everything. Before we begin, drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and stay until the end, because what starts in blood ends in something you won't see coming. The morning Evan Hale's life shattered for the second time, he was thinking about breakfast. Not the profound kind of thinking. No careful consideration of nutrition or meal planning or any of that stuff the parenting blogs insisted good fathers did. Just the low-grade panic of a man who'd opened the refrigerator to find 3 eggs, half a gallon of milk that might have turned, and a determination not to disappoint his daughter again. Lily had mentioned pancakes the night before. Offhand, casual, the way kids do when they're testing whether you're actually listening. Evan had been listening. He stood in the narrow kitchen of their duplex apartment, flour dust already settling into the creases of his work-stained hands, trying to remember if his late wife's recipe called for 2 cups or 3. The notebook where Sarah had written everything down, recipes, appointment reminders, instructions for living, sat somewhere in a box he couldn't bring himself to open, so he guessed, added what felt right. Hoped the muscle memory of watching her hands move through these same motions would guide his own. Through the thin walls, he could hear Mrs. Chen next door arguing with someone on the phone in rapid Cantonese. Below them, the Garcia twins were already fighting over the bathroom, their voices carrying up through the heating vents. Normal sounds, Tuesday morning sounds. The kind of ordinary chaos that meant the world was still turning, still predictable, still safe. He should have known better. Evan had lived in enough dangerous places to recognize the weight of silence before violence. He'd spent 3 tours learning to read the air, to taste the shift in atmosphere that happened right before everything went sideways. But that was the old life, the one he'd walked away from. Here in this cramped kitchen, measuring flour into a chipped ceramic bowl, he'd let himself forget. Let himself believe that ordinary mornings were possible. That the biggest challenge in his day would be getting Lily to school on time and fixing the transmission on old man Barrett's Dodge before noon. Titan lifted his head from where he'd been dozing near the radiator. The German shepherd's ears pricked forward, his entire body going still in that particular way that meant something had changed, something most people wouldn't notice yet. "Easy, boy," Evan murmured, but his own hands had already stopped moving. The first shot came at 7:47 a.m. Evan knew the exact time because he'd just glanced at the microwave clock, wondering if he should wake Lily or let her sleep another 10 minutes. The sound punched through the morning quiet, a sharp crack that most people might have mistaken for a car backfiring or construction work, or any of the other urban noises that decent people trained themselves to ignore. Evan's body knew better. His muscles remembered before his mind caught up, dropping him into a crouch, even as his conscious brain tried to argue that this couldn't be happening here. Not in this neighborhood. Not on a Tuesday morning when he was making pancakes for his daughter. The second and third shots followed in rapid succession. Different caliber, different direction. Titan was on his feet now, a low growl building in his chest, his body positioned between Evan and the window in a protective stance that was pure instinct. "Lily!" Evan's voice came out steady despite the ice flooding his veins. "Lily, I need you to get on the floor. Now." A pause. Then his daughter's voice from her bedroom, still thick with sleep and confusion. "Dad?" "Floor now. Stay low." He heard the thump of her body hitting the carpet. "Good girl. Smart girl." She knew that tone in his voice, knew it meant you didn't ask questions, you just moved. He drilled it into her without ever explaining why a mechanic's daughter needed to know tactical response protocols, without ever admitting that some habits from the old life couldn't be unlearned. More shots, sustained fire now. Evan crawled to the window, keeping below the sill. Titan moved with him, pressed against his side. Outside, the street had transformed from sleepy residential to war zone in under 60 seconds. 2 vehicles, a black Escalade and a silver sedan, sat at angles in the intersection, doors hanging open like broken wings. Muzzle flash sparked from behind the Escalade. Return fire came from somewhere near the bodega on the corner. Civilians were running, scrambling for cover, their screams cutting through the gunfire. A woman in a blue bathrobe stumbled, went down, crawled behind a mailbox. An old man abandoned his grocery bags in the middle of the street, cans of soup rolling across the asphalt. And there, in the open space between the vehicles and the storefronts, someone was down. At first, Evan couldn't make out details. Just a body sprawled on its side, one arm stretched out toward the curb in a gesture that looked almost peaceful, like someone who'd decided to take a nap in the middle of the street. But then the person moved, a weak, struggling motion that sent a fresh spike of adrenaline through Evan's chest. Not dead. Not yet. "Dad?" Lily's voice again, closer now. She'd army crawled from her room to the kitchen doorway. "Dad, what's happening?" "Stay down." He didn't look at her, couldn't take his eyes off the street. "Stay exactly where you are." More shots. The person on the ground tried to move again, managed to lift their head maybe 3 inches before collapsing back down. From this angle, Evan could see blood now. A lot of it. Spreading out from beneath the body in a dark pool that looked almost black against the gray concrete. The gunfire from the Escalade shifted, concentrating on something to the east. Voices shouted in Spanish, angry and commanding. An engine revved. The Escalade lurched forward, tires screaming, and suddenly the street was clearing. The shooters were pulling back, retreating down the avenue in a controlled withdrawal that spoke of training and discipline. In 30 seconds, maybe less, they'd be gone. And whoever was bleeding out on that street would be alone. Evan's hands were gripping the windowsill hard enough to hurt. His breathing had gone shallow and quick, his heart rate spiking in a way it hadn't in 3 years. Not since the last time. Not since he'd promised Sarah, promised himself, promised everyone who mattered that he was done with this life. Done being the kind of man who ran toward gunfire instead of away from it. The wounded person moved again. Weaker this time. One hand scrabbling uselessly at the pavement, trying to find purchase, trying to drag themselves toward cover that was still 6 feet away, might as well have been 6 miles. "Someone's hurt," Lily said quietly. She'd crawled close enough to see through the window now, her small face pale in the morning light. "Dad, someone's hurt really bad. I know. We should help them. We should stay inside where it's safe. But, Lily," he finally looked at her, saw his own daughter staring back at him with eyes too old for her 9 years, eyes that had already seen too much loss, too much pain, eyes that were asking him a question he didn't want to answer. "This isn't our fight." She held his gaze for a long moment. Outside, the Escalade's engine faded to silence. The street fell quiet except for distant sirens. Still blocks away. Still too far to matter. The person on the ground had stopped moving. "Mom would have helped," Lily said. Not accusatory, just a fact. Simple and devastating. Evan felt something crack inside his chest, a fault line he'd been trying to ignore for 3 years. Ever since cancer had taken the only person who'd ever really understood him. Sarah would have helped. Sarah had always helped. It was one of the 1,000 things he'd loved about her, one of the 1,000 things that had made her death so goddamn unfair. She'd been good. Genuinely, uncomplicatedly good. The kind of person who saw someone suffering and didn't calculate the risk before acting. The kind of person Evan had never been. "Stay here," he heard himself say. "Lock the door behind me. Don't open it for anyone except me or the police." Lily's eyes widened. "Dad, no!" "I mean it. Lock the door." He was already moving, muscle memory and training taking over before his better judgment could intervene. Titan moved with him, staying close to his left side the way he'd been trained. "Titan stays with you. He'll protect you if something happens." "Nothing's going to happen to you." Lily's voice had gone tight and high. "Right, Dad? Nothing's going to happen?" Evan paused at the door, looked back at his daughter, small and fierce and terrified. Wanted to promise her that everything would be fine, that he'd be back in 2 minutes, that this was just a quick trip to help a stranger and then life would return to normal. But he'd never lied to her before. Wasn't about to start now. "Lock the door," he repeated. Then he was out into the hallway, Titan's nails clicking on the worn linoleum behind him. "Titan, stay." The dog stopped, whined, but obeyed. Evan closed the apartment door and heard the lock click into place. Good. Whatever happened next, At least Lily would be safe. Had to be enough. The stairwell smelled like cooking oil and mildew. Evan took the stairs 3 at a time, his body falling back into patterns he'd thought he'd forgotten. Tactical awareness, threat assessment, the weight of his own breath, the rhythm of his own heartbeat. All of it familiar, all of it wrong. He burst through the building's front door into chaos. The street looked worse from ground level. Brass casings littered the pavement, glinting dully in the morning sun. Someone's car alarm was going off, a monotonous wail that cut through the sirens drawing closer. The smell hit him immediately, gunpowder and exhaust, and underneath it all, the copper-penny scent of blood. The wounded person was maybe 40 feet away. Still down, still bleeding. Evan ran. His boots slapped against concrete, each step carrying him farther from safety and deeper into the kind of trouble he'd spent 3 years avoiding. His mind cataloged threats automatically, windows overlooking the street where a sniper might position, parked cars that could conceal a second wave of shooters, escape routes if everything went wrong. The old programming, the instincts that had kept him alive through 3 tours and a dozen operations that had never made it into any official report. He reached the body and dropped to his knees, hands already moving to assess the damage. The wounded person was a woman, early 30s, athletic build, dark hair matted with blood. She wore jeans and a gray hoodie, both now soaked through with red. 3 visible wounds that Evan could see, one in the shoulder, one in the side, one high on the thigh that was pumping blood with each heartbeat. The thigh wound was the problem. Femoral artery maybe, or close enough that the distinction didn't matter. The woman's eyes fluttered open, unfocused, glassy with shock and blood loss. "Hey!" Evan pressed his hands against the thigh wound, applying pressure. Blood welled up between his fingers, hot and slick. Too much blood. "Hey, stay with me. You're gonna be fine." A lie. They both knew it. The woman's lips moved. She was trying to say something, but the words came out garbled. Evan leaned closer. "Badge," she managed. "Left pocket." He fumbled with his free hand, keeping pressure on her leg with the other, found a wallet in her hoodie pocket, flipped it open, stared at the ID and shield inside. Detective Kara Vance, Metro Police, Narcotics Division. Shit. The word came out before he could stop it. An undercover cop, which meant this wasn't random gang violence or a territorial dispute. This was something worse, something planned. "Okay, detective, okay, I got you. We're going to get you out of here." Except they weren't, because Kara Vance was bleeding out faster than Evan could stop it, and the nearest hospital was 10 minutes away, and the sirens that had seemed so close were still too far. He needed a tourniquet, needed proper medical supplies, needed time he didn't have. Kara's hand grabbed his wrist. Weak grip, already fading. Her eyes locked onto his with sudden, desperate clarity. "They knew," she whispered. Blood flecked her lips. "They knew I was coming. Someone told them. Don't talk. Save your strength. Listen." Her fingers tightened. "It's not gang. It's not what they'll say. Someone on the inside, feeding them. Information. Weapons." Her breathing hitched, rattled. "They'll cover it up. Pin it on someone else. Anyone else." Evan glanced up. The sirens were closer now, maybe 2 minutes out. He could see people starting to emerge from buildings, drawn by morbid curiosity or concern. Witnesses, cameras. His face would be on a dozen cell phone videos by now, captured kneeling over a dying cop with blood all over his hands. "They'll blame you," Kara said, as if reading his thoughts. "The setup, it's already in motion. You need to—" The first police cruiser rounded the corner, lights strobing blue and red across the storefronts. Brakes squealing, doors opening, voices shouting commands that Evan's brain translated automatically. "Get down! Show me your hands! Don't move!" He raised his hand slowly. Blood dripped from his fingers onto the pavement. Kara was still trying to speak, still trying to warn him about something, but her voice had faded to nothing. Her eyes were closing. "Officer down!" someone shouted. "We need a bus here now!" More cruisers arrived. More voices. Hands grabbed Evan, pulled him back from Kara's body. Someone was reading him his rights. Someone else was asking if he was armed. The questions came fast and overlapping, designed to confuse, designed to trip him up. Standard interrogation technique. He'd used it himself once upon a time, back when he'd been on the other side of these situations. I was helping her, Evan said, kept his voice level, kept his hands visible. I saw her go down. I came out to help. Helping by getting her blood all over you? I was applying pressure to her wounds. You know this woman? No? You always run toward gunfire to help strangers. I'm a veteran. I have medical training. I saw someone who needed help. What's your name? Evan Hale. One of the cops, older, Sergeant Stripes, face that had seen too much and believed too little, stepped closer. His eyes narrowed as he looked Evan up and down, taking in the blood, the military bearing that Evan couldn't quite hide, the controlled calm that probably looked suspicious to anyone who didn't understand combat stress response. Evan Hale, the sergeant repeated slowly. You got ID in my apartment, upstairs. Evan nodded toward his building. I can get it if you'll stay right where you are. The sergeant glanced at the other officers. Cuff him. Wait, you're not under arrest, yet. Just taking precautions. Metal clinked. Cold steel closed around Evan's wrists. You understand? Evan understood perfectly. He understood that he was a man covered in cop blood, standing over a crime scene with no witnesses to corroborate his story. He understood that Detective Caravance's last words had been a warning about a setup, about someone on the inside who couldn't afford to let the truth come out. He understood that he'd just made himself the perfect fall guy. He also understood that it was too late to do anything about it now. The ambulance arrived. Paramedics swarmed over Kara's body, working with practiced efficiency. Evan watched them load her onto a stretcher, watched the blood bag go up, watched them slam the doors and peel out with lights and sirens screaming. Wondered if she'd make it. Wondered what she'd been investigating that had gotten her shot. Wondered how deep this thing went. All right, the sergeant gestured to his officers. Take him to the station. We'll sort this out downtown. They walked Evan to a cruiser, put a hand on his head as they guided him into the back seat, the way they always did. Protective gesture that felt like aggression. The door slammed shut. Through the window, Evan could see his building, 3rd floor. He counted the windows until he found his apartment, saw a small face pressed against the glass, looking down at him. Lily. She was watching, seeing her father get put into a police car, seeing him taken away just like she'd been afraid of. And there was nothing he could do about it, nothing he could say. He couldn't even wave because his hands were cuffed behind his back. He tried to smile, tried to make his expression say, everything's okay, this is just a misunderstanding, I'll be home soon. But Lily was too smart for that, too experienced with loss to believe in easy reassurances. She just stared at him with those 2 old eyes, her small hand flat against the window glass. Then Titan appeared beside her. The dog's head came into view, massive and protective. Lily's other hand buried itself in the thick fur of his neck, and somehow that helped. Knowing she wasn't alone. Knowing the dog would protect her until Evan could get back. If he got back. The cruiser pulled away from the curb. Evan watched his daughter and his dog until a turn took them out of sight. Then he was looking at the street where Kara Vance had almost died, where the morning had fractured into something unrecognizable. Blood still stained the pavement. Brass casings still glittered in the gutters, evidence of violence that had erupted without warning and would ripple out in ways no one could predict yet. The cop in the passenger seat was on the radio, rattling off codes and information. The driver kept glancing in the rearview mirror, studying Evan like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Neither of them spoke to him. He was cargo now. Evidence. A problem to be processed. Evan closed his eyes and tried to think, tried to plan, but all he could see was Lily's face in the window. All he could hear was Kara Vance's voice. They'll blame you, the setup. It's already in motion. He'd made a choice. Run toward danger instead of away from it. Help a stranger instead of protecting himself. It was the choice Sarah would have made, the choice Lily had needed to see him make, and now he was going to pay for it. The station house was exactly what Evan had expected. Institutional beige walls, fluorescent lights that turned everyone's skin the color of old paper, the particular smell of stale coffee and old sweat and barely contained desperation. They processed him through booking with mechanical efficiency. Fingerprints, photos, personal effects cataloged and bagged. He answered their questions with yes and no, and I want a lawyer, watching the clock on the wall tick forward, while somewhere across the city, Kara Vance was either dying or dead, and the people who'd tried to kill her were probably already covering their tracks. They put him in an interrogation room. Standard setup, metal table bolted to the floor, 3 chairs, mirror on one wall that didn't reflect quite right, cameras in the corners. The temperature deliberately kept cold enough to be uncomfortable. All the little psychological tricks designed to break people down, make them want to confess just to get warm and go home. Evan had helped design rooms like this once, knew all the angles. He sat, waited, thought about Lily, wondered who was with her now. Mrs. Chen probably, or one of the other neighbors. Someone would have called social services by now. Standard procedure when a single parent got arrested. They'd take her into protective custody. If he didn't get released soon, put her in the system. The thought made his chest tight. The door opened. The sergeant from the scene walked in, followed by another detective, younger, sharp-eyed, wearing an expensive suit that didn't match his city salary. The sergeant sat down across from Evan. The detective stayed standing, leaning against the wall like he was just there to observe. "Mr. Hale?" The sergeant opened a folder. "I'm Sergeant Reeves. This is Detective Marcus Shaw. You want to tell us what happened this morning? I want a lawyer. You're not under arrest. You're free to leave any time. We just want to understand the situation." Classic technique. Blur the line between voluntary cooperation and custodial interrogation. Get the suspect talking before they realize their rights are being violated. Evan had run this play 100 times himself back in the day. "Then I'm leaving." He stood up. Detective Shaw pushed off the wall, taking a step forward. Not blocking the door, not quite. Just creating a presence. A suggestion that leaving might not be as simple as Evan thought. "Sit down, Mr. Hale." "Am I under arrest?" "Not yet." "Then, but we can fix that real quick if you want to be difficult." Shaw's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We got you on scene with a dead cop's blood all over you. We got witnesses who saw you kneeling over her body. We got gunshot residue tests that I'm betting will come back positive, because you said yourself you're a veteran with combat experience. You really want to lawyer up right now? Make yourself look guilty before we even start asking questions?" Evan stayed standing. Every instinct he had was screaming that this was wrong, that Detective Shaw was pushing too hard, that the whole dynamic in this room felt off. But Shaw was right about one thing. The optics looked bad. And if he walked out now, demanded a lawyer, refused to cooperate, it would only look worse. He sat down. Smart choice. Shaw pulled out the chair next to Reeves, spun it around backward, and straddled it. Casual, friendly, like they were just having a conversation. "So, walk us through your morning." Evan did, kept it simple, kept it factual. Woke up, made breakfast, heard gunshots, saw Detective Vance go down, made the decision to help. Applied pressure to her wounds, found her badge, waited for police to arrive. Shaw listened with a half smile that suggested he was hearing a story he'd heard 1,000 times before. When Evan finished, Shaw glanced at Reeves, then back at Evan. "That's a nice story," Shaw said. "Clean, simple, hits all the right notes. Hero veteran saves dying cop. Very noble. It's what happened. Except here's what's bothering me." Shaw leaned forward. "This is a rough neighborhood, Mr. Hale. People hear gunshots around here. They don't run toward them. They lock their doors and pretend they didn't hear anything. But you? You run straight into an active shooting situation. Why?" "I told you, I'm a veteran. I have medical training." "Right. You mentioned that." Shaw's smile widened. "Funny thing, though, I pulled your service record. 3 tours, yeah. Infantry. Saw some heavy action. But you weren't a medic, were you? You were... what was it? Special operations. Unit designation still classified." Silence fell over the room like a weight. "So, here's what I'm wondering," Shaw continued. "What's a former Spec Ops soldier doing living in a shithole apartment in this neighborhood? Working as a mechanic? Raising a kid on his own? That doesn't track for me. You know what does track? Someone who knows how to handle weapons. Someone with training in tactical operations. Someone who might have gotten involved in some off-the-books work after leaving the service. I haven't touched a weapon in 3 years. No? No. Not even when Detective Vance was getting shot? I wasn't there when she was shot. I told you. You heard the gunfire and ran outside. That's your story. But see, we got ballistics now. 9mm, 40 caliber, and a rifle round. 3 different weapons. Now, the gang members who started this thing, we know them, they're small time. They had the 9 and the 40. But that rifle? That's interesting. That's not standard street thug equipment. Evan's hands had gone still on the table. He could see where this was going now, could see the shape of the trap they were building. "You think I shot her?" he said quietly. "I think someone with your particular skills would know exactly where to shoot someone to make it look bad, but not immediately fatal," Shaw replied. "I think maybe you and Detective Vance had some kind of arrangement. Maybe you were feeding her information. Maybe she was supposed to pay you and didn't. Maybe things got complicated." "That's insane." "Is it?" Shaw pulled out a phone, swiped through something, turned the screen toward Evan. It showed a photo of Kara Vance, a different photo than the one on her badge. This one was surveillance footage from somewhere, showing her talking to a man Evan didn't recognize. Detective Vance was investigating weapons trafficking, specifically military-grade weapons making their way into civilian hands, the kind of weapons that someone with your background might have access to. "I don't have access to anything." Your buddy Marcus Tillman would disagree. The name hit Evan like a punch to the gut. Marcus. He hadn't heard that name in years, hadn't thought about him in longer. Marcus Tillman had been in his unit, had saved his life once in Kandahar, had also been dishonorably discharged for selling weapons to local warlords. Last Evan had heard, Marcus was in federal prison. "I haven't spoken to Marcus in 5 years, Evan said. "No? Then why'd he mention your name when he was interviewed 2 months ago?" "I don't know. You'd have to ask him." "We did. He said you kept in touch, said you helped him move some merchandise after you both got out, said you were his contact here in the city." "He's lying." "Maybe." Shaw shrugged. "Or maybe you're lying. Either way, we got a dead cop who was investigating illegal weapons. We got a former special operations soldier who happens to know a convicted arms dealer, and we got you covered in that cop's blood. You see how this looks?" Evan saw exactly how it looked, saw the whole picture now. Kara had tried to warn him. "They'll blame you, the setup. It's already in motion." Someone had planned this. Someone who knew Evan's background, knew about his connection to Marcus Tillman, knew exactly how to make him look guilty. All they'd needed was for Evan to be at the scene, and he'd walked right into it. "I want a lawyer," Evan said again. Shaw's smile finally faded. "Yeah, thought you might." They took him back to holding, put him in a cell with a drunk who was sleeping it off, and a kid who looked barely 18 and couldn't stop crying. Evan sat on the metal bench and stared at the wall and tried to figure out how everything had gone so wrong so fast. Outside, through the small window high up on the wall, he could see the sky turning orange with sunset. He'd been here for hours. A whole day gone. Lily would be terrified by now. Titan would be confused. His whole life was falling apart, and he couldn't do a damn thing about it from inside a holding cell. Somewhere in the city, Kara Vance was either alive or dead. If she was alive, maybe she could clear his name, but if she was dead, or if she woke up too damaged to remember, or if the people who'd set this whole thing up got to her first, he was screwed. The door at the end of the corridor clanged open. Footsteps approached. Evan looked up to see a public defender standing outside his cell. Young woman, tired eyes, carrying a briefcase that had seen better days. "Mr. Hale? I'm Rachel Cortez. I've been assigned to your case." She pulled out a notepad. "I've reviewed the preliminary charges, obstruction of justice, interference with a crime scene, and they're considering adding conspiracy to commit assault on a police officer." "I didn't do any of that." "I believe you. But belief isn't going to get you out of here. Evidence is. And right now, the evidence looks bad." She glanced down at her notes. "They found gunshot residue on your hands and clothes." "I was in the military. I've been around weapons. That residue could be years old." "Maybe. But combined with everything else," she shook her head. "Look, I'm going to be honest with you. The DA is pushing this hard. There's pressure coming from somewhere high up. They want to make an example out of you." "Why?" "I don't know, but I've got a bail hearing scheduled for tomorrow morning. In the meantime, is there anyone who can take care of your daughter? I've got a note here that social services picked her up this afternoon." The words hit harder than Evan had expected. Social services. They'd taken Lily, put her in the system. Exactly what he'd been afraid of. "Her aunt," Evan said. voice rough. Sarah's sister, Rebecca Morris. She lives upstate. Number's in my phone. I'll make the call. Rachel made a note. Mr. Hale, I need you to prepare yourself. The bail is going to be high. Even if the judge grants it, you might not be able to afford it. And if you can't make bail... She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't need to. Evan understood. If he couldn't make bail, he'd be stuck in here until trial. Could be months. Could be longer. And Lily would be in foster care the whole time, thinking her father had abandoned her just like her mother's death had abandoned them both. What about the cop? Evan asked. Detective Vance, did she make it? Rachel hesitated. She's in critical condition, induced coma. The doctors aren't sure if she'll wake up. So no help there. No one to corroborate his story. No one to explain what she'd been investigating or why someone had wanted her dead. Just Evan and the evidence that had been carefully arranged to make him look guilty. He leaned back against the cold concrete wall, closed his eyes, tried to think of a way out, and came up empty. The night stretched out long and sleepless. The drunk in his cell eventually woke up and threw up in the corner. The kid never stopped crying. Guards made rounds every few hours, their footsteps echoing down the corridor. Somewhere far away, someone was screaming. Normal sounds for a city lockup, the kind of place Evan had thought he'd never end up. Morning came gray and reluctant through the high window. They served breakfast, something that might have been eggs, might have been paste, came on a tray with coffee that tasted like burned rubber. Evan choked it down because he needed the calories, needed to stay sharp for whatever came next. At 9 a.m., they brought him to court. Shackles on his wrists and ankles, orange jumpsuit instead of his own clothes. The courtroom was packed, mostly with people who had nothing to do with his case, just the usual parade of minor criminals and broken families that cycled through the system every day. But in the back, he spotted a few faces that didn't belong. Reporters, maybe? Or people who'd heard about the cop shooting and wanted to see the man who'd been accused. Rachel Cortez met him at the defense table. The DA is asking for $200,000 bail. I'm going to argue that you're not a flight risk, that you have ties to the community, that you're a single father with no criminal record. Will it work? I don't know. The judge was a black woman in her 50s with reading glasses perched on her nose and an expression that suggested she'd heard every sob story and excuse in the book. She looked down at the file in front of her, then up at Evan. Mr. Hale, you're charged with obstruction of justice and interference with a crime scene in connection with the shooting of Detective Kara Vance. How do you plead? Not guilty, Your Honor. She made a note. Miss Cortez, I've reviewed your brief. Mr. Hale has no prior criminal record, has a minor child, and has been a resident of the city for 3 years, but the nature of these charges is serious. The people have expressed concerns about witness tampering given Mr. Hale's military background and training. Your Honor, my client is a mechanic who is trying to save a police officer's life. The people have evidence suggesting otherwise. Mr. Shaw? Detective Shaw stood up from the prosecution side of the room. Your Honor, we have reason to believe Mr. Hale was involved in the circumstances that led to Detective Vance being shot. We have testimony linking him to known weapons traffickers. We believe he presents a significant flight risk and a danger to the investigation. That's completely baseless, Rachel started, but the judge held up a hand. I've heard enough. Bail is set at $150,000, cash or bond. Next case. The gavel came down. Evan felt the sound echo through his chest. $150,000. He had maybe $3,000 in savings. Even with a bail bondsman, he'd need $15,000 in cash. Money he didn't have, couldn't get. They took him back to holding. Back to the cell with its smell and its noise and its total lack of privacy. Rachel promised to file motions, to keep fighting, to do everything she could. But her eyes said what her words didn't. This was bad. This was worse than bad. Days blurred together. Evan lost track of how many. 72 hours became 96, became a week. Rebecca had come down from upstate to get Lily, at least. That was something. His sister-in-law had never liked him much. Thought Sarah could have done better than a military burnout with PTSD and no real prospects. But she loved Lily. Would take care of her, keep her safe until this got sorted out. If it got sorted out. On the 8th day, Rachel came back with news. Detective Vance woke up. Evan's head snapped up. She did? This morning, she's still weak, but she's conscious. And Evan, she's asking to speak with you. They brought Evan to the hospital in shackles. Not the kind of visit you see in movies where the wrongly accused man gets a private moment with the one witness who can clear his name. No. This was two uniformed officers flanking him on either side. Detective Shaw trailing 3 steps behind with his hand resting casual on his service weapon, and a pair of handcuffs connecting Evan's wrists to a chain around his waist. Maximum security transport for a man who'd spent the last 8 days eating commissary food and trying not to think about what his daughter's face had looked like when social services took her away. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and desperation. They walked him through corridors painted that particular shade of institutional green that was supposed to be calming, but just made everything feel more hopeless. Nurses glanced up as they passed, their eyes tracking the shackles, the guards, making assumptions. Evan kept his head up anyway, refused to look like what they thought he was. Caravance's room was on the 4th floor, ICU, behind a door with a posted guard who checked Shaw's credentials twice before letting them through. The officer on the left, younger guy, probably fresh out of the academy, pushed the door open and gestured for Evan to enter. 5 minutes, Shaw said from the doorway, and we're recording everything. The room was smaller than Evan had expected, medical equipment crowded around a single bed, machines beeping and whirring in rhythm with the breathing of the woman who'd almost died in his arms 9 days ago. Caravance looked worse than she had bleeding out on the street, paler, smaller, the kind of fragile that made you realize how close someone had come to not existing anymore. She was awake, though. Her eyes tracked Evan as he entered, sharp despite the pain medication they'd probably pumped into her. An oxygen tube ran under her nose. IV lines snaked from both arms. But she was conscious, alive, and looking at him like she was trying to read a book written in a language she didn't quite speak. Mr. Hale. Her voice came out hoarse, barely above a whisper. They said you pulled me out. Yes, ma'am. They also said you might have been the one who put me there. Evan didn't flinch. No, ma'am. That would be whoever tipped off the people you were investigating. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. Painful. Brief. So you remember what I told you? Hard to forget. Detective Vance, Shaw interrupted from the doorway. You don't have to do this right now. You need rest. We can take your statement when you're stronger. Kara's eyes didn't leave Evan's face. I'm doing it now. The doctor said, I don't care what the doctor said. She shifted in the bed, winced, kept going anyway. Get me something to write with. I'm making a formal statement. Shaw hesitated. Evan could see the calculation happening behind those sharp eyes. Whatever this was, whatever Kara was about to say, Shaw didn't want it on record. Which meant it was going to contradict the narrative they'd been building around Evan, which meant Shaw was in on it. Detective, that's an order, Shaw. Unless you want to explain to Internal Affairs why you refused to take a statement from a wounded officer. The silence stretched out like pulled wire. Then Shaw pulled out his phone, opened a recording app, set it on the table beside Kara's bed. For the record, this is Detective Marcus Shaw taking a voluntary statement from Detective Kara Vance regarding the incident on the morning of October 15th. Detective Vance, are you giving this statement of your own free will? Yes. And you understand you're under no obligation to speak while recovering from your injuries? I understand. Now shut up and let me talk. She took a breath. It rattled. On the morning of October 15th, I was conducting an undercover operation in the Riverside neighborhood. I'd received intelligence about a weapons shipment coming through, military-grade hardware being funneled to gang operations. My contact said the handoff was happening at 7:30 a.m. Your contact's name? Shaw asked. Confidential informant. I'm not burning my source. Detective Vance, you want this statement or not? Shaw's jaw tightened. Continue. I arrived on scene at 7:15, took position near the bodega on MLK and 5th. At 7:20, 2 vehicles arrived, black Escalade and a silver sedan. 4 men got out. I didn't recognize 3 of them, but the 4th, she paused, swallowed. The 4th was Officer Daniel Price, Vice Division. The room went very still. You're saying a police officer was involved in the weapons deal, Shaw said carefully. I'm saying a police officer was running it. Price was the one handing over the merchandise. had it in the trunk of his personal vehicle. I saw money change hands. I was about to call for backup when Price looked straight at me, made eye contact, and I knew my cover was blown. Someone had told him I'd be there. So you opened fire? No, they opened fire. Price gave the signal, and those men lit me up before I could even reach for my weapon. I took 3 rounds in the first 5 seconds, went down, tried to crawl to cover, but I was losing blood too fast. I remember thinking this was it. This was how I died. And then her eyes found Evan's again. And then this man came running out of nowhere. Didn't hesitate. Didn't stop to think about whether it was safe. He just ran straight into the kill zone and dragged me behind a parked car. Applied pressure to my wounds. Kept me alive until the ambulance arrived. If it wasn't for Evan Hale, I'd be dead. Period. The machines beeped. Shaw's phone recorded. Evan stood there with chains on his wrists and tried to process what was happening. So you're saying Mr. Hale saved your life, Shaw said. I'm saying Mr. Hale is a hero who got arrested for doing the right thing. Kara's voice was getting weaker, but her eyes stayed hard. And I'm saying someone in this department set me up. Someone with access to my operation details. Someone who knew exactly when and where I'd be. And I'm betting that same someone is the reason Evan Hale is standing here in handcuffs instead of getting a medal. That's a serious accusation. It's a fact. And here's another one. Price didn't stick around to finish me off because he thought I was already dead, but I wasn't. I heard him on the phone with someone. Heard him say, "It's done," and make sure the mechanic takes the fall. Those were his exact words. The mechanic. They knew who lived in that building. They knew Evan would come out to help. They planned for it. Evan felt something cold settle in his stomach. They'd used him, counted on his training, his instincts, the part of him that couldn't walk away from someone dying, turned his best impulses into evidence of guilt. "Where's Price now?" Evan heard himself ask. Shaw's expression closed off. "That's not your concern. He tried to kill a cop and frame an innocent man. Seems like it should be everyone's concern. Officer Price is currently under investigation." "Bullshit." Kara's voice cracked, but she pushed through. "Price is under protection. You moved him somewhere safe, gave him paid leave, told him to keep his head down until this blows over. Because if Price goes down, he takes half the department with him. Isn't that right, Shaw?" "I don't know what you're talking about." "No. Then why haven't you arrested him? Why is Evan still in custody when I just told you he's innocent? Why are you more interested in protecting a dirty cop than getting justice for one who almost died?" "Because we need evidence. Though I'm your evidence. I'm a decorated detective with 12 years on the force telling you exactly what happened. What more do you need?" Shaw picked up his phone, stopped the recording. "This interview is over. Detective Vance needs rest." "Don't you dare. You're injured and on heavy medication. Your testimony is compromised. We'll revisit this when you're in better condition to give a coherent statement." "My statement is coherent." But Shaw was already gesturing to the uniforms. "Get him out of here." The officers moved forward, grabbed Evan's arms. He didn't resist, just looked at Kara one more time, trying to memorize her face, the determination in her eyes, the fact that at least one person in this whole mess knew the truth. "I'll keep talking," Kara said as they pulled him toward the door. "I'll go to the press. I'll go to internal affairs. I'll go to the FBI if I have to. You can't bury this, Shaw. You need to focus on recovering, detective. Let us handle the investigation." "You are the investigation. That's the problem." They were in the hallway now, the door closing, Kara's voice cutting off mid-sentence as the lock clicked into place. Evan walked between the officers, chains clinking with each step, thinking about everything she'd said. Officer Daniel Price. Weapons trafficking. A conspiracy that went high enough to bury evidence and ruin lives. He'd pulled one thread, and the whole thing was starting to unravel. They put him back in the transport van. Shaw climbed in the front passenger seat this time, which meant he wanted to talk. Wanted to say something off the record where there weren't cameras or witnesses. The kind of conversation that happened in spaces between official procedures. They drove 3 blocks before Shaw turned around. "You seem like a smart man, Hale." Evan didn't respond. Smart enough to know that what just happened in that hospital room doesn't change anything. Vance is compromised. Head injury, trauma, pain medication strong enough to make you see things that aren't there. Any lawyer worth his retainer will tear her testimony apart. She seemed pretty clear to me. She seemed delirious, accusing a decorated officer of attempted murder based on what? A glimpse during a firefight? That's not evidence. That's paranoia. Funny how paranoid people keep ending up shot. Shaw's smile was thin. You want to know what I think happened that morning? I think you were involved with the weapons shipment. I think Vance figured it out and you panicked, shot her yourself, then played the hero when other officers arrived. Classic misdirection. That's creative. Wrong, but creative. Is it? Because we pulled your phone records. You made 3 calls to a burner number the week before the shooting. Same burner number that contacted Marcus Tillman in prison. You want to explain that? Evan's hands had gone cold. He hadn't made any calls to any burner numbers. But someone had. Someone with access to his phone, or the ability to fake records, or both. They were building a case out of lies and manufactured evidence, stacking it high enough that the truth couldn't climb over it. I want a lawyer, Evan said again. Yeah, that's what I figured. Shaw turned back around. Here's how this plays out, Hale. Vance's statement gets buried under medical doubt. Your military record and connection to Tillman make you the perfect suspect. And when this goes to trial, and it will go to trial, you're going to lose. You'll spend the next 20 years in a federal prison while your daughter grows up without you. Unless, the word hung in the air. Unless what? Evan asked, even though he knew he shouldn't engage, knew this was exactly what Shaw wanted. Unless you cooperate, give us something we can use. Tell us who else was involved, where the weapons came from, who you were selling to. You do that, maybe we can work out a deal. Reduce charges, lighter sentence. You might even see your kid graduate high school. I wasn't involved in any weapons deal. Then you're going to die in prison, Shaw shrugged. Your choice. They pulled up to the detention center. The officers hauled Evan out of the van, marched him through processing again, took him back to his cell. The drunk was gone. The crying kid was gone. In their place was a man in his 40s with prison tattoos and dead eyes, who looked at Evan like he was evaluating whether the trouble would be worth it. Evan sat on his bunk and stared at the wall and tried to think. Kara had given him pieces. Officer Daniel Price, weapons trafficking, a leak inside the department. But pieces weren't enough. He needed the whole picture, needed to understand how deep this went, who else was involved, what they were protecting that was worth killing a cop and framing an innocent man. The problem was, he couldn't investigate from inside a cell, couldn't follow leads or interview witnesses or do any of the things that might actually prove his innocence. All he could do was wait. Hope that Rachel Cortez could work some legal magic. Hope that Kara would keep fighting despite the pressure. Hope that somewhere, somehow, the truth would surface before it was too late. 3 days crawled past. Rachel filed motions. The judge denied them. The DA pushed for a trial date. Evan's cellmate, a guy named Curtis, who was in for armed robbery, mostly kept to himself except for the occasional comment about the food or the guards, or how the whole system was rigged against people like them. Evan didn't disagree. On the 4th day, Rachel showed up with news that somehow managed to be both good and terrible. They're moving Kara Vance, she said, keeping her voice low. Officially, it's for her protection. Unofficially, it's to keep her from talking to reporters. She tried to give an interview to Channel 7. Hospital security shut it down before she could say anything substantive. Where are they moving her? I don't know. The order came from high enough up that even I can't get the details. But Evan, there's something else. I've been digging into Officer Daniel Price. He's been on the force for 8 years. Vice Division, like Vance said. And here's the interesting part. His bank records show deposits that don't match his salary. $50,000 here, $30,000 there. Always in cash. Always with no clear source. Someone's paying him off. Looks that way, but when I tried to get the full financial records, I hit a wall. The request was denied by the assistant district attorney himself. Said it was an ongoing investigation and the information was classified. They're protecting him. They're protecting someone. Price might just be the middleman. Rachel pulled out her tablet, swiped through some documents. I also found something in your case file. The phone records Shaw mentioned? They came from a telecommunications analyst named Jeffrey Chen. I know Jeff. We went to law school together, so I called him. Asked him to walk me through how he pulled those records. And? And he got real uncomfortable real fast. Said the request came through unusual channels. Said he'd never actually verified the phone was yours, just matched the number to your account and ran with it. When I pushed him on the methodology, he basically admitted the whole thing was shaky. Those records might not hold up in court, so they falsified evidence. They cut corners at minimum. At maximum, yeah, someone manufactured evidence to frame you. She closed the tablet. Problem is, proving it means accusing multiple law enforcement officers of conspiracy. That's not a fight we can win without serious backing. We'd need the FBI or Internal Affairs or someone with real authority to step in. What about Kara? She's Internal Affairs' wet dream. A decorated detective accusing another officer of attempted murder? She's also a head injury patient on morphine who can't remember half of what happened. Shaw's team is already spreading the narrative that her accusations are trauma-induced delusions. And without physical evidence, the weapons from the deal, those would be evidence. Assuming they still exist. Assuming they weren't moved or destroyed the minute Vance went down. We're talking about people with resources, Evan. People who've been covering their tracks for what looks like years. They're not going to leave loose ends lying around. Evan leaned back against the concrete wall. Cold seeped through his jumpsuit. Outside the cell, someone was arguing with a guard, their voices echoing down the corridor. The same sounds he'd been hearing for days. The same hopeless background noise of a system that chewed people up and didn't care what came out the other side. "What about Lily?" he asked quietly. "How is she?" Rachel's expression softened. "I spoke with Rebecca yesterday. Lily's staying with her upstate, going to school. Rebecca says she's not talking much, just kind of going through the motions. She asks about you every day, wants to know when you're coming home." "What do you tell her?" "I tell her you're working on it, that you didn't do anything wrong and the truth will come out." Rachel paused. "I don't tell her that the system doesn't care about truth as much as it cares about closing cases. I don't tell her that sometimes innocent people stay locked up because it's easier than admitting the people with badges screwed up." "Thanks for the pep talk. I'm not here to blow sunshine, Evan. I'm here to give you realistic expectations, and realistically, we're losing. Unless something changes, unless we find evidence that's too big to ignore or a witness with too much credibility to dismiss. You're going to trial, and at trial, you're going to get destroyed. So what do I do?" "You pray for a miracle." She stood up, gathered her things. "Or you get lucky. Sometimes they're the same thing." She left. The guard locked the cell door behind her. Curtis looked over from his bunk. "Your lawyer always that cheerful?" "She's honest. I'll give her that. Honest don't win cases, man. Evidence wins cases, and from what I heard, they got all the evidence pointing at you." Curtis rolled over, facing the wall. "You're screwed." Evan didn't argue. Hard to argue with the truth. That night, he dreamed about Sarah. Not the sick version from those last months, not the hollow-eyed ghost who'd wasted away in their bedroom while cancer ate her from the inside out. The real Sarah. Healthy Sarah. The woman who'd laughed at his terrible jokes and fixed motorcycles in cut-off shorts and knew exactly how to make him feel human again after he'd come back from places that had tried to sand that humanity away. In the dream, they were in their old apartment, the one they'd shared before Lily was born, before the diagnosis, back when the future still felt like something they could control. Sarah was making coffee. Evan was reading the paper. Normal domestic morning, the kind they'd had 1,000 times. "You're going to have to fight," Sarah said without turning around. "I am fighting." "No, you're waiting. There's a difference." She poured 2 cups, brought one to him. "You spent 3 tours fighting other people's battles. Now you need to fight your own." "I don't know how, not from in here." "Then get out." "It's not that simple." "It is exactly that simple." She sat down across from him. Her eyes were the same green he remembered, the same green Lily had inherited. "You think they're going to just let you go? Give you a fair trial? These are people who shoot cops and frame mechanics. They're not playing by rules, so why are you?" "Because I'm not like them." "No, you're better than them, which means you're the only one who can stop them." She reached across the table, took his hand. "Evan, our daughter is out there without her father. That detective is fighting alone against her own department. How many other people are these guys hurting? How long before someone else gets shot, gets framed, gets buried under lies?" "I can't do anything from a cell." "Then don't be in a cell." He woke up before he could respond. The dream faded, but Sarah's words didn't. They sat in his chest like a weight he couldn't shake. She was right. She'd always been right. Waiting for the system to work was the same as giving up. And Evan Hale was a lot of things: broken, grieving, probably traumatized in ways he'd never fully dealt with. But he wasn't someone who gave up. He sat up, looked around the cell. Curtis was snoring. The corridor was quiet except for the distant sound of a television from the guard station. 3 a.m., maybe. The dead hours when most people slept and the night shift got sloppy. Evan had broken out of worse places than this. The thought arrived fully formed, like his subconscious had been working on it while he slept. He ran through the facility layout in his head. Guard rotations, camera blind spots, weak points, the kind of tactical assessment he'd done 100 times in hostile territory. This wasn't that different, just concrete and barbed wire instead of desert and insurgents. He could do this. Probably. Maybe. If he was smart and fast and lucky, and if he was wrong, if he got caught, it would prove everything they were saying about him. Violent, dangerous, guilty. But if he didn't try, he'd lose Lily forever. She'd grow up thinking her father was a criminal, would spend her whole life carrying that weight, that shame, the same way Evan had carried the weight of everything he'd done in the service. He couldn't do that to her. Couldn't let her believe the lies. Decision made then. He spent the next 2 days watching, learning patterns. The guards changed shift at 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. The morning shift was older, more experienced, less likely to screw up. But the evening shift was younger, chatty. They spent more time on their phones than actually monitoring the cells, and there was a blind spot near the service entrance where the camera angle didn't quite reach. He'd noticed it on the way back from his lawyer visits. Curtis noticed him noticing. You thinking what I think you're thinking? I don't know. What am I thinking? You're thinking about taking a walk, unscheduled like. Curtis sat up. I see that look. Had it myself twice. Didn't work out either time, but I see it. I'm just observing. Yeah, sure. Curtis was quiet for a minute. Then, you get out? You gonna finish what you started? Go after the guys who put you in here? I'm gonna prove I'm innocent. Same thing, probably. You need anything, backup, distraction, whatever. I can help. Got nothing but time and a serious grudge against the system. Could make it worth your while. Why would you help me? Because you're not like the rest of these assholes. You actually didn't do the thing they're saying you did. That's rare in here. Almost refreshing. Curtis leaned back. Plus, you got a kid. I got a kid too. Somewhere. Haven't seen her in 6 years. But I remember what it was like, wanting to be someone she could be proud of. You get a chance to be that person for your daughter. You should take it. Evan studied the man across from him, trying to read whether this was genuine or a setup. But Curtis's eyes were clear, honest, and Evan needed an ally more than he needed caution. If I move, Evan said carefully, I move tomorrow night, 6:15 p.m., right when the shifts are changing. There's a window during the handoff where attention slips. And you need someone to make noise elsewhere, pull focus. Something like that, Curtis grinned. I can make noise. What are they going to do? Put me in jail? The next day felt like it lasted a week. Evan went through the motions, ate meals, made small talk, acted like a man who'd accepted his fate. But his mind was running scenarios, escape routes, contingencies. What he'd do if he made it out, where he'd go, who he'd contact first. Kara. He needed to find Kara. If they'd moved her for protection, it meant they were worried about what she knew, what she might say, which meant she was the key to everything. Get to her, get her full testimony, get evidence that would force the FBI or someone with actual authority to step in. Simple, impossible, necessary. At 6 p.m., the evening shift arrived. Evan watched them through the cell bars. 3 guards tonight instead of the usual 2. Bad luck. But one of them was the rookie, Jackson, young kid who'd only been on the job a few months. He'd be the weak link. 6:10. The shifts were overlapping, day guards briefing night guards, everyone standing around talking instead of watching cells. Evan caught Curtis's eye, nodded once. Curtis stood up, started yelling, Guard, guard, I need medical. Something's wrong. I can't breathe. I think I'm having a heart attack. He was pretty convincing, clutched his chest, went down on one knee, made gasping sounds that echoed down the corridor. 2 guards came running, Jackson and the senior officer, a guy named Morales. They unlocked the cell, moved in to check on Curtis. And Evan moved. He'd been a lot of things in his life, but slow had never been one of them. He hit Morales from behind, arm around the neck, just enough pressure to cut off blood flow without crushing the windpipe. The guard went down hard. Jackson spun, reaching for his radio, but Evan was already there. Simple disarm. Twist, pull. The radio clattered to the floor, then a pressure point strike to the shoulder that dropped Jackson like a puppet with cut strings. "Sorry," Evan muttered, already stripping Morales of his keys and badge. "Nothing personal." Curtis was up, grinning. "Damn, son, you don't mess around. Stay here. Don't make it worse for yourself." "Where's the fun in that?" But Curtis didn't follow. Just watched as Evan locked them both in the cell, then started walking. The corridor was chaos now. Other inmates shouting, demanding to know what was happening. The third guard was coming from the guard station, hand on his weapon. Evan didn't give him time to draw. Quick rush, low tackle, the kind of move that had gotten him through hand-to-hand combat training. The guard's head hit the concrete with a crack that made Evan wince, but he was still breathing. 3 guards down. Cameras had definitely caught all of it, which meant he had maybe 2 minutes before the whole facility went on lockdown. Evan ran. The service entrance was exactly where Evan remembered it. Down 2 corridors, through the laundry processing area, past the storage rooms that smelled like industrial detergent and institutional despair. His boots barely made sound on the concrete floor. Morales' badge got him through the first security door. The second one required a code, but Evan had watched Jackson punch it in 3 times over the last week. Muscle memory worked both ways. 4729. The lock clicked green. Behind him, alarms started screaming, lockdown protocols kicking in. Evan had maybe 60 seconds before every exit sealed and the real manhunt began. He burst through the service door into the loading dock. Evening air hit his face, carrying the smell of garbage and exhaust and freedom. 2 trucks sat idle, engines off. A delivery driver was signing paperwork with a dock supervisor, both of them looking up at the sudden alarm noise with the casual confusion of people who'd heard too many false alarms to take them seriously anymore. Evan kept moving, walked, didn't run. Running drew attention. Walking like you belonged somewhere got you surprisingly far. "Hey!" The supervisor spotted him. "You're not authorized." Evan didn't stop. Hit the fence line, found the gap he'd noticed during his transport trips. The chain link had been cut and poorly repaired, probably by maintenance workers who needed a smoke break spot. He squeezed through, felt the metal scrape his shoulder. Then he was on the other side and moving into the maze of warehouses and industrial buildings that surrounded the detention center. Sirens erupted from the facility. Spotlights came on, sweeping the perimeter. Evan ducked into an alley between 2 buildings, pressed himself against the wall, controlled his breathing. His heart was hammering, but his hands were steady. Training. Always came back to training. A police cruiser screamed past the alley entrance, lights flashing. Then another. They'd be setting up a perimeter, checking bus stations, train terminals, anywhere a fugitive might logically run, which meant Evan needed to do something illogical. He needed his dog. The thought hit him with perfect clarity. Titan was still at the apartment. Mrs. Chen had promised to feed him, walk him, keep him safe until Evan got out. The old woman probably had no idea her neighbor was now a fugitive. But Titan would. Dogs knew. And Evan needed someone he could trust, someone who wouldn't ask questions or demand explanations or potentially turn him in. He also needed weapons, money, and information. The apartment had 2 of those 3. Maybe all 3 if he was lucky. Evan moved through the industrial district like a ghost. Stayed in shadows, avoided main streets. Every car that passed got evaluated. Police, civilian, threat level, escape options. His brain had shifted into combat mode, the part of him that had survived 3 tours taking over from the part that had spent 3 years pretending to be normal. 20 minutes of careful movement brought him to a convenience store 3 blocks from his neighborhood. Through the window, he could see a TV mounted behind the counter, local news playing. His own face filled the screen. A mugshot from his booking, looking exactly like what a dangerous fugitive should look like. Beneath it, text scrolled. Armed suspect escapes custody. Considered dangerous. Do not approach. Armed. He wasn't armed, but they'd added that detail anyway because it justified shooting first if they found him. Evan pulled his collar up, kept walking. The neighborhood got more familiar with each block. His building was a risk. They'd have it staked out for sure. But he didn't need to use the front entrance. The building was old, pre-war construction with fire escapes that nobody maintained and a basement access that half the residents didn't know existed. He'd found it his second week living there, cataloged it the way he cataloged every tactical detail of his environment. Old habits. The basement entrance was behind a dumpster in the alley. Evan checked both directions, saw nobody, then dropped down into the stairwell. The door was locked, but the frame was rotted. One good shoulder check and it popped open with a crack that sounded way too loud in the quiet evening. Inside, the basement smelled like mold and rat droppings. Evan pulled out his phone. They'd let him keep it in property storage, which meant they'd probably added tracking software, which meant he had maybe 5 minutes before they triangulated his position. He used the light to navigate through the maze of old furniture and broken appliances until he found the stairs leading up into the building proper. 3rd floor. His apartment. The door was sealed with police tape, official crime scene. They'd torn the place apart looking for evidence, probably. Evan didn't care. He wasn't here for anything they'd think to take. He peeled back the tape carefully, tried his key. It still worked. Thank you. Bureaucratic inefficiency. The door swung open and Evan stepped into what used to be his home. It looked like a tornado had hit it. Furniture overturned. Drawers emptied. His daughter's room ransacked. Pictures pulled off walls. They'd been thorough. Angry, even. This wasn't professional investigation. This was personal violation. A low growl came from the kitchen. Evan's hand went to his waist on instinct, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. Then recognition kicked in, and the growl transformed into a whine, and 80 pounds of German Shepherd hit him like a freight train. Tighten. Easy, boy. Easy. Evan went down on one knee, let the dog's weight push him back against the wall. Titan was licking his face, whining, tail going so hard it was hitting the door frame. I know, buddy. I missed you, too. Mrs. Chen must have left him here when the news broke. Smart woman. Knew the dog would protect the place better than any lock. Titan looked thinner than Evan remembered. Stressed. Dogs felt everything their people felt, and Evan's life had been nothing but stress for 2 weeks. We gotta move fast, okay? You with me? Titan's response was to press closer, as if physical contact could make up for lost time. Evan buried his face in the dog's fur for just a second, let himself have that moment. Then he was up and moving to his bedroom. The floorboard under the bed was still loose. Evan pried it up, reached into the gap, pulled out the waterproof bag he'd stashed there 3 years ago. The bag Sarah had told him to throw away. The bag that contained every part of his old life he'd sworn he was done with. Inside, $12,000 in cash, a burner phone, 3 fake IDs, and a Sig Sauer P226 with 2 full magazines. Evan stared at the gun. Hadn't touched one in 3 years. Had promised Sarah, promised himself, promised everyone that mattered that this part of his life was over. But Sarah was dead, and he was a fugitive, and sometimes promises couldn't survive contact with reality. He loaded the weapon, checked the action. Muscle memory. Like riding a bike, except the bike could kill people. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. Evan almost didn't answer, then realized it might be Rachel. Might be someone trying to help. He swiped to accept. Hail. The voice was female, weak, familiar. It's Vance. Evan's blood went cold. How did you? Same way they're tracking you. I borrowed a nurse's phone, hacked the detention center's security system, pulled your cell phone number from your intake paperwork. I've got maybe 2 minutes before someone notices I'm not in my room. She was breathing hard. Pain or exertion or both. Listen carefully. They moved me to St. Mary's, private floor. But it's not protection, it's containment. Shaw's been here twice trying to get me to recant my statement. When I refused, they started talking about psychiatric evaluation. They're going to bury me in paperwork and medication and make sure nothing I say gets taken seriously. Where's Price? That's why I'm calling. I've got a source, someone who's been feeding me information about the weapons pipeline. She works in the evidence room at the main precinct. Name's Angela Torres. She contacted me this morning, said she found something. Transaction record showing Price moving confiscated weapons back out onto the street. Serial numbers, dates, everything we'd need to prove the trafficking operation. Did she go to internal affairs? She tried. They shut her down, told her to mind her business. So she grabbed the files and went underground. She's scared, Hale. Thinks they're going to kill her to keep this quiet. I told her to sit tight until I could get someone to protect her, but now I'm locked in a hospital bed, and you're... She paused. You broke out. Seemed like the best option available. It was stupid and reckless, and probably just made everything worse. Another pause. But I get it. I'd have done the same thing. Her breathing hitched. Angela's hiding at her sister's place. East side, near the old factory district. Building with the red door. Apartment 4C. You need to get to her before Shaw's people do. Get those files. Get them to someone who can't be bought or threatened. FBI, maybe. Press. Someone. What about you? I'll be fine. They need me alive to discredit, not dead. Turns me into a martyr. She laughed. It sounded painful. Besides, I've been shot before. Takes more than a couple bullets to keep me down. Vance. Angela Torres, East Side, red door. Go now, Hale, before they figure out where you are. The line went dead. Evan stood there holding the phone, processing. Angela Torres. Evidence room. Transaction records. It was exactly what he needed. Proof. Something concrete enough to force people to pay attention. It was also obviously a trap. Shaw knew Vance would contact him. Probably had her phone tapped, her visitors monitored, every communication channel compromised. This Angela Torres might be real, might have real evidence. But the second Evan showed up at that apartment, he'd be walking into an ambush. On the other hand, what choice did he have? Keep running? Hide? Wait for them to hunt him down? At least this way he was moving forward, taking action instead of reacting. Titan nudged his hand. The dog's eyes were alert, ready, waiting for direction. Evan checked his watch. 7:30 p.m. Full dark outside. Rush hour traffic clearing out. Good conditions for moving unseen. All right, boy, we're going for a ride. He grabbed a backpack, threw in the cash, the fake IDs, extra ammunition, changed out of the orange jumpsuit into jeans and a dark hoodie, found Titan's tactical vest, the one from back when the dog had been a working animal, and strapped it on. Old habits. If they were going into danger, they were going prepared. The building's back stairs took them down to the alley. Evan's truck was still parked on the street where he'd left it 2 weeks ago. They'd probably tagged it in the system, put out alerts. He'd need different transportation. 2 blocks away, a early 2000s Honda Civic sat under a broken streetlight. Perfect. Evan pulled out a Slim Jim from his bag, another relic from his old life that Sarah had told him to throw away, and had the door open in 30 seconds. Titan jumped in the passenger seat. Evan hotwired the ignition, and they were rolling. Sorry, he muttered to whoever owned the car. I'll return it. Probably. The drive to the east side took 15 minutes through back streets and residential areas where patrol cars wouldn't be concentrated. Evan kept one eye on the rearview mirror, watching for tails. Nothing obvious, but that didn't mean they weren't there. The factory district looked like economic collapse had hit it with a sledgehammer. Empty buildings with broken windows, graffiti covering every vertical surface. The kind of neighborhood where people didn't call the police because they either didn't trust them or were actively hiding from them. Good place to disappear. Also, good place to get killed. The building with the red door sat at the end of a dead-end street. 3 stories, brick facade crumbling, half the windows boarded up. A single light burned in a 3rd-floor window. Apartment 4C would be there. 2nd floor, corner unit. Evan parked the Civic 3 blocks away, approached on foot with Titan at his side. Every instinct he had was screaming that this was wrong. Too quiet. Too convenient. The kind of setup where you walked in and didn't walk out. But Angela Torres might be real. Might have evidence. Might be the key to everything. He reached the red door. It was unlocked. Another warning sign. Evan drew the cig, held it low against his leg. Titan moved ahead, sniffing, body language tense. They climbed the stairs together, each step creaking loud enough to announce their presence to anyone listening. 2nd floor. Apartment 4C. The door was ajar. Definitely a trap. Evan pushed it open anyway, swept the room with his weapon, clearing corners, checking threats. The apartment was small, kitchenette, living room, bedroom door hanging open. Empty, except for the body on the floor. Woman, late 20s, Latina, single gunshot wound to the head. Blood pooling under her, already starting to congeal. Dead maybe 2 hours. On the table next to her, a manila folder lay open. Papers scattered, transaction records like Vance had said. Weapons, serial numbers, dates, names, everything they needed to prove the corruption. And all of it contaminated now because Evan was a fugitive and his fingerprints would be all over this crime scene and they'd just add another murder to his charges. Clever, Evan muttered. Real clever. Titan growled. Not at the body, at the hallway. Evan spun. 3 men stood in the doorway, not cops. Private muscle. The kind you hired when you needed something done that wouldn't look good on an official report. All 3 had weapons drawn. All 3 looked like they knew how to use them. The one in front smiled. Mr. Hale, we've been expecting you. Yeah, I figured. Evan's finger was on the trigger. Quick math. 3 against 1, no cover, civilian building with thin walls. Any shooting would be loud, messy, probably get innocent people killed. You're working for Price. We work for people who pay us. Price is one of them, so is Detective Shaw. So are a bunch of other folks who'd prefer you stopped being a problem. The man's smile widened. You should have stayed in lockup, made this easier for everyone. Where's the real Angela Torres? There is no Angela Torres. Well, there was. Girl who worked in the evidence room, just like Detective Vance said. But she had an unfortunate accident last week. Car crash. Very tragic. He gestured at the body on the floor. This is Maria Santos. Prostitute, drug addict, someone nobody will miss. But with your fingerprints all over her in this apartment, she makes a great narrative about a fugitive's killing spree. You people are unbelievable. We're thorough. There's a difference. The man took a step forward. Here's how this goes. You put the gun down, we take you somewhere quiet, and this ends clean. Or you try to fight, we kill you right here, and the story becomes fugitive shot while resisting arrest. Either way, you're done. But one way is faster. Evan looked at the 3 men, at their weapons, at Titan, who was vibrating with barely controlled aggression, at the folder of evidence that might or might not be real, at the dead woman on the floor who'd been murdered just to frame him. I've got a counter offer, Evan said. You walk away. Tell whoever's paying you that I'm harder to kill than they thought, and maybe you get to go home to your families tonight. The man laughed. Actually laughed. You think you're still that guy? The Spec Ops badass who could take on a squad and walk away? Newsflash, Hale. You're just a washed-up mechanic with a murder charge and a death wish. Yeah, probably. Evan's thumb flicked the SIG safety off. But I'm a washed-up mechanic who really doesn't want to die in a shitty apartment in front of a dog who's already lost too much. So if you're going to do this, do it. Otherwise, get the hell out of my way. The silence stretched, tension building like pressure before an explosion. The men looked at each other, some unspoken communication passing between them. Then the leader shrugged. Your funeral. 3 things happened simultaneously. The men raised their weapons. Evan dove left, firing twice. Titan launched himself at the nearest man's throat. The world exploded into noise and chaos and violence. Evan's first shot caught the leader in the shoulder. Not fatal, but enough to spin him around, throw off his aim. His return fire punched into the wall where Evan had been standing. The second man was screaming, Titan's jaws locked on his forearm, the gun falling from nerveless fingers. The third man was trying to get a clear shot. But Evan was already moving, rolling behind the couch, coming up firing. 2 more shots, center mass. The third man went down hard. The leader was recovering, switching his gun to his offhand. Evan didn't give him time. Closed the distance in 3 steps, disarmed him with a wrist lock that probably broke something, swept his legs, put him face down on the floor with a knee in his spine and the SIG pressed against the base of his skull. Titan. Release! The dog let go of the second man who was crawling toward the door, making sounds that weren't quite words. Broken arm. Probably some trauma. He'd live. You've got 10 seconds, Evan said to the man under him. Tell me who's running this. Names, locations, everything. Go to hell. Wrong answer. Evan pressed harder with his knee. Your friends are down. You're down. I'm the one with the gun. Think about your priorities. You shoot me, you're just proving them right. Dangerous fugitive, cop killer. Everything they said you are. Maybe, but you'll still be dead. Evan leaned close. I've killed better men than you for worse reasons. Don't test me. The man went very still, calculating, trying to figure out if Evan was bluffing. Evan wasn't sure himself. 3 years ago, he wouldn't have hesitated, but 3 years ago, he'd been a different person, harder, less burdened by things like conscience and consequences. Price, the man finally said. Everything runs through Price. He's the middleman, takes weapons from evidence, sells them to gangs, kicks money up the chain to his protectors. Who's protecting him? I don't know all of them. Shaw for sure. Some people in the DA's office, maybe higher. They don't exactly send memos about this shit. Where's Price now? Safe house, north side. I don't have the address. You're lying. I swear I don't know. They don't tell us that stuff. We're just muscle. We do what they pay us to do, and we don't ask questions. Evan believed him. Low-level contractors wouldn't have operational details. They just get assignments and carry them out, which meant this guy was useless except as a witness, and witnesses tended to disappear when they became inconvenient to powerful people. Get out, Evan said. Take your friend. Get him to a hospital. Tell Price and Shaw that I'm not stopping. Tell them they can bury this or I can bury them. But one way or another, the truth is coming out. He stepped back. Let the man up. The guy grabbed his injured friend, hauled him toward the door, stopped, looked back. You know they're going to kill you, right? Even if you get the evidence, even if you prove everything. People like that don't go down easy. They'll burn the whole city before they let you win. Then I guess it's going to be a hell of a fire. The men left. Evan stood there breathing hard, adrenaline draining out of his system. The apartment smelled like gunpowder and blood. The third man, the one Evan had shot center mass, wasn't moving. Probably dead. Definitely dead. Evan had killed him. 3 years of being a decent person, trying to leave violence behind, and it took less than a minute to fall back into old patterns. He felt sick. Titan nudged his hand. The dog's nose was bloody from the fight, but his eyes were steady, trusting, still seeing Evan as someone worth following. Come on, boy. We need to go before more of them show up. He grabbed the folder of documents. Hoped they were real. Hoped Maria Santos, whoever she really was, hadn't died for nothing but theater. Then he and Titan were moving down the stairs, out the red door, into the night that was definitely going to get worse before it got better. 2 blocks away, sirens started wailing. Someone had called it in. Gunshots in the factory district weren't exactly rare, but enough of them would eventually draw attention. Evan and Titan ran. They made it back to the stolen Civic. Evan's hands were shaking as he started the engine. Titan sat in the passenger seat, panting, watching him with those steady eyes. The folder sat between them. Transaction records, serial numbers, names and dates that might prove everything Caravans had said, or might just be elaborate forgeries designed to make Evan look even more guilty. He needed someone he could trust, someone with authority, someone who couldn't be bought by Price and Shaw and whoever else was protecting this operation. The problem was, Evan didn't know who that someone was. Rachel was compromised by being his lawyer. Kara was locked in a hospital. Every cop in the city was looking for him. The FBI might help, might not, might just arrest him on sight and ask questions later. He was alone. Him and a dog and a folder of papers that might or might not be worth the lives they'd cost. His phone buzzed. Different burner number. Evan almost threw the phone out the window, but something made him answer. Mr. Hale? The voice was male, older, unfamiliar. My name is Agent Frank Morrison, FBI. I've been investigating the weapons trafficking operation in your city for 6 months, and I think you and I need to talk. Evan's finger hovered over the end call button. Every instinct screamed trap. FBI agents didn't just call fugitives out of nowhere with friendly offers to chat. They coordinated with local law enforcement, set up tactical teams, brought you in with overwhelming force and zero room for negotiation. But he answered anyway. How'd you get this number? Same way I've been tracking Price's operation for 6 months. Phone taps, surveillance, good old-fashioned detective work. Morrison's voice carried the weight of someone who'd seen too much bureaucratic bullshit and stopped caring about politics. I know you broke out of detention 3 hours ago. I know you just left a crime scene at the factory district, and I know you're holding documents that could blow this whole thing wide open. Question is, are you smart enough to bring them to someone who can actually use them? Or are you going to keep running until Shaw's people put a bullet in you? How do I know you're really FBI? You don't. Could be another setup. Could be Shaw using a fake badge to lure you in. Only way to find out is to meet face to face. A pause. But consider this. If I wanted you dead, I'd have sent a tactical team to that apartment building instead of calling. If I wanted you arrested, I'd have coordinated with local PD and had them waiting outside. I'm calling because I need what you have, and you need someone with federal authority who isn't dirty. We can help each other, or we can both lose. Your choice. Titan's head was cocked to one side, listening to Evan's side of the conversation like he could parse meaning from tone alone. The dog's ears were still up, alert but not aggressive. No threat detected. Or maybe just no threat he could smell through a phone line. Where? Evan asked. You know the old railway yard on the west side? Abandoned since the 90s. There's a maintenance shed near the north fence. I'll be there in 40 minutes. Come alone. Well, you and the dog. I've read your file. I know about Titan. If this is a trap, then you'll shoot me and keep running. But it's not. I've been watching Price and Shaw for months, Hale. Building a case brick by brick. Then you went and became a loose end they needed to tie up, and suddenly all my careful work went to hell because they're scrambling to cover their tracks. You're either going to help me finish this or you're going to die tonight. Those are your only options. The line went dead. Evan sat there in the stolen Civic, engine idling, weighing his choices. Trust a voice on a phone. Walk into another potential ambush. Risk everything on the word of someone who could easily be lying. Or keep running. Stay a fugitive. Watch from a distance as Price and Shaw buried the truth under enough lies and dead bodies that it would never surface. What do you think, boy? Evan looked at Titan. We trust him. Titan's tail did a single thump against the seat. Not exactly a ringing endorsement, but not a warning either. Dogs had instincts about people. If Titan wasn't freaking out, maybe Morrison was legitimate. Or maybe Evan was so desperate for an ally that he was reading meaning into a dog's tail wag. He put the Civic in gear and headed west. The railway yard was exactly the kind of place where bad things happened in movies. Rusted tracks disappearing into overgrown weeds. Graffitied freight cars sitting on sidings that hadn't seen use in decades. Chain-link fence with more holes than metal. The perfect spot for a meeting that needed to stay off the books. Also the perfect spot for an execution. Evan parked 2 blocks away and approached on foot. Titan ranged ahead, nose working, checking for threats. The night had turned cold, that particular autumn chill that cut through clothing and reminded you winter was coming whether you were ready or not. Evan's breath misted in the air. His hand rested on the cig in his waistband. The maintenance shed was exactly where Morrison had said it would be. Single-story concrete block building with a rusted metal door and windows that had been boarded up years ago. A single light burned inside, visible through gaps in the boards. Someone was definitely there. Evan circled the building once, checking sight lines, escape routes, positions where a sniper might set up. Old habits. He didn't see anything obvious, but that didn't mean much. Good ambushes didn't advertise themselves. He tried the door. Unlocked. Pushed it open and stepped inside with the cig drawn. The man sitting at a folding table in the middle of the room didn't look like an FBI agent. He looked like someone's tired uncle. Late 50s, graying hair, cheap suit that had seen better days, reading glasses perched on his nose while he studied papers spread across the table. A thermos of coffee sat at his elbow. No weapon visible, but his jacket was cut loose enough to hide a shoulder holster. He looked up when Evan entered. Smiled. Mr. Hale? Thanks for coming. That's Titan, I presume. The dog had moved to Evan's left side, positioning himself between Evan and the stranger. Protective stance, ready to attack if needed. Show me your badge, Evan said. Morrison pulled out a credential case, flipped it open, tossed it onto the table. FBI shield. Photo ID. Looked legitimate, but Evan had seen good forgeries before. He picked it up, studied it. The hologram seemed right. The agency seal was properly positioned. Either real or an extremely professional fake. Satisfied? Morrison asked. Getting there. Why are you working this alone? Where's your team? My team is back in the field office writing reports and following dead leads Because the SAC doesn't believe me when I say there's corruption in the local PD. Morrison poured himself more coffee. I've been investigating this weapons pipeline for 6 months. Started with a tip from an informant in Detroit. Guns confiscated in Michigan showing up in gang shootings here. Traced the serial numbers back, found they'd all passed through your city's evidence room at some point. That led me to Price. And Shaw? Shaw's muscle, the fixer. When things threaten to go sideways, Shaw makes them go away. People, evidence, witnesses, whatever needs disappearing. Morrison gestured to the papers on the table. I've been documenting everything, wire transfers, phone records, surveillance photos, but it's all circumstantial. Nothing that would survive a defense attorney with half a brain. I need hard evidence. Transaction records, the kind of documentation that proves beyond doubt what these guys are doing. Evan pulled the folder from his backpack, set it on the table. Morrison's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. Is this transaction records, serial numbers, dates, names, everything Caravant said existed? Evan paused. Assuming it's real. Could be forgeries. Could be another layer of the setup. Morrison was already flipping through the documents, his fingers moving with practiced efficiency. He pulled out a phone, started taking photos of individual pages, cross-referencing with something on his screen. His expression shifted from hopeful to excited to grimly satisfied. These are real, he said finally. I've got half these serial numbers in my own files, weapons that went missing from evidence months ago. This is exactly what I needed. He looked up at Evan. Where did you get these? Dead woman in an apartment. She was already gone when I got there. Set up to make me look like I killed her. Of course it was. Morrison stood, started pacing. Price is getting sloppy, desperate. That's good for us. Desperate people make mistakes. He stopped. How much do you know about the scope of this operation? Not much. Weapons trafficking, dirty cops, people willing to kill to keep it quiet. It's bigger than that. Price isn't the top of the chain. He's middle management. The weapons come through evidence, sure, but they're not just going to local gangs. They're being distributed across 3 states. We're talking millions of dollars, maybe tens of millions. That kind of money doesn't move without serious protection. How high does it go? I don't know yet, but high enough that when I tried to get warrants, they got blocked at the federal level. High enough that the SAC told me to drop it and focus on other cases. High enough that I'm sitting in an abandoned railway shed talking to a fugitive instead of running this through proper channels. Morrison sat back down. They want you dead, Hale. Not arrested. Dead. Because you're the only loose end that ties everything together. You saved Vance. You were at the scene. You can testify to what she told you. As long as you're alive, the whole story stays alive. So what's the play? We need Vance's official testimony, on record, in front of people who can't be bought, and we need Price in custody before he disappears. Morrison tapped the documents. With these, I can get a federal warrant. Bring in a clean team from the Bureau, but it has to happen fast, tonight, before Shaw realizes you're still breathing and figures out what we're doing. Vance is in a hospital under guard. How do you plan to get her testimony? I don't. You do. Morrison pulled out a key card. St. Mary's, 4th floor private wing. I've got a contact there, nurse named Patricia Chen. She's the one who helped Vance call you earlier. She'll get you in to see Vance, help you get what we need on camera. Full testimony. Everything she saw, everything she knows. We upload it to the cloud, make copies, send it to every news outlet in the state. Make it too public to bury. And Price? I've got a team standing by. Soon as we have Vance's testimony secured, I make the call. We hit Price's safe house, bring him in federal custody. By the time Shaw and his people figure out what's happening, it's too late to stop it. Evan studied Morrison's face, looking for tells, signs of deception. The man seemed genuine, tired and frustrated and motivated by something that looked like actual justice. But Evan had been fooled before, had trusted people who turned out to be liars, had learned the hard way that good intentions didn't always mean good people. Why should I trust you? Evan asked. Because you don't have a choice. You're a fugitive with a murder charge. Every cop in the city wants you dead or locked up. Your only play is to expose the truth so completely that they can't bury it. And I'm the only person with the authority and resources to make that happen. Morrison leaned forward. I could have called this in, Could have had a SWAT team waiting for you, but I didn't. Because I need you. And whether you like it or not, you need me. Silence stretched between them. Titan's breathing was the only sound. The dog had relaxed slightly, no longer in full defensive mode. Still alert, but not sensing immediate danger. Okay, Evan said finally. Let's do it. But if this goes sideways, if I even smell a setup, you'll shoot me and take your chances alone, I get it. Morrison stood, offered his hand. For what it's worth, Hale, I've read your file. Your real file, not the bullshit version Shaw's been circulating. You're a good man who got dealt a bad hand. Let's fix that. Evan shook his hand, felt the calluses of someone who'd done actual field work instead of writing a desk. Another small piece of evidence that Morrison might be legitimate. They spent the next 20 minutes planning. Morrison had tactical maps of St. Mary's, guard rotations, camera blind spots. He'd been preparing for this for longer than Evan had been involved. The operation had 3 phases. Get Evan into the hospital, record Vance's testimony, get out without being arrested or killed. Simple. Impossible. Necessary. One more thing, Morrison said as they were preparing to leave. Your daughter, Lily. She's with your sister-in-law upstate, right? Evan's blood went cold. How do you... Because I've been watching Price's operation, and Price has been watching you. He's got people monitoring Rebecca's house. Nothing aggressive yet, just surveillance. But if this goes bad tonight, if you don't make it out, they might decide she's a loose end too. She's 9 years old. They killed a woman and staged it as your crime scene. They shot a cop and tried to frame you for conspiracy. You really think they'd hesitate to tie up one more loose end? Morrison pulled out another phone. I've got a team I trust, 2 agents. They're already in position near Rebecca's place. Your sister-in-law doesn't know they're there, but if anything happens, if anyone tries to approach that house, my people will intervene. Your daughter stays safe. You have my word. Evan wanted to argue, wanted to demand proof, verification, something more than a stranger's word, but he was out of options and out of time. He had to trust someone. Might as well be the guy who'd actually bothered to protect Lily without being asked. Thank you, Evan said quietly. Don't thank me yet. We've still got to survive the night. They left the railway yard in separate vehicles. Morrison in a nondescript sedan that screamed federal agent. Evan in the stolen Civic that screamed car thief. The plan was to approach the hospital from different directions, minimize the chance that anyone watching would connect them. The drive took 15 minutes. Evan spent it thinking about Lily, wondering if she was asleep, wondering if Rebecca had told her what was happening or tried to shield her from the truth, wondering what kind of damage all of this was doing to a kid who'd already lost her mother and was now watching her father become a fugitive. He was doing this for her, had to keep reminding himself of that. Every risk, every dangerous choice, all of it was to clear his name so Lily could have her father back. So she wouldn't grow up thinking he was a criminal, so she wouldn't carry that weight her whole life. If it worked, if he survived, if Morrison was telling the truth. St. Mary's sat on the north edge of downtown. Modern building, all glass and steel, the kind of architecture that was supposed to look welcoming but just came across as expensive. The emergency entrance was lit up bright enough to guide planes. The main entrance was quieter, fewer people, less security. Evan parked 3 blocks away, left Titan in the car with the windows cracked. The dog whined, not happy about being left behind. I know, boy, but I can't take you inside, too obvious. Stay, guard the car, I'll be back soon. Titan's ears went back, but he obeyed. Evan hated leaving him, but a man with a German shepherd was memorable. A man alone could blend into hospital traffic. Morrison's contact, Patricia Chen, was waiting near the staff entrance. Asian woman in her 50s, nurse's scrubs, tired eyes that had seen too many long shifts. She looked Evan up and down with the clinical assessment of someone used to evaluating trauma. You're Hale. Not a question. Yeah. Agent Morrison vouched for you, said you're trying to help Kara. She pulled out a visitor badge. Put this on. Act like you belong here. 4th floor is restricted access, but I'll get you through. Security changes shift in 10 minutes. That's our window. They moved through the hospital like they owned it. Patricia walked with the confident stride of someone who'd worked there 20 years. Evan matched her pace, kept his head down, avoided eye contact with other staff. The visitor badge said John Miller, close enough to his real name that he'd respond if someone called it. They took the elevator to 4. The doors opened onto a hallway that was noticeably different from the rest of the hospital. Nicer, quieter, private wing for patients who could afford it or needed special protection. A security guard sat at a desk near the elevator, but he was scrolling through his phone and barely glanced up as Patricia walked past. "Evening, Marcus," she said. "Evening, Pat. Late shift?" Someone's got to keep this place running. They were through. That easy. Or that easy because Patricia had spent weeks building trust, establishing patterns, making herself invisible through familiarity. Evan made a mental note to thank Morrison for finding someone this competent. Kara's room was at the end of the hall. Another guard outside, younger, more alert. He straightened as they approached. "Ms. Chen, visitor hours are over." "I know, Tony, but Dr. Reeves ordered a consult, specialist from out of state." She gestured at Evan. "Dr. Miller, neurologist. He's reviewing Detective Vance's case." Tony looked at Evan's badge, at his face, suspicious but not certain. "I wasn't notified." "Of course you weren't. The order came through 20 minutes ago. You want to call Dr. Reeves and wake him up at home to verify. Because I promise you he's already cranky about being on call tonight." The guard hesitated, weighing protocol against the risk of pissing off a doctor. Patricia was good, knew exactly which buttons to push. 10 minutes, Tony said finally, and I'm checking with the charge nurse. "You do that." Patricia opened the door. Evan followed her inside. The room was dark, except for monitors casting blue light across Kara Vance's face. The detective looked marginally better than the last time Evan had seen her. Less tubes, better color. Still obviously hurt, but conscious and aware. Her eyes tracked them as they entered. Recognition hit, and she tried to sit up, winced, fell back against the pillows. "Hale? What the hell are you doing here?" "Nice to see you too. How are you feeling?" "Like I got shot 3 times. What are you broke out. I heard it on the news. They're saying you killed someone at the factory district." "Setup. Same as everything else." Evan pulled out his phone, switched it to video mode. "Morrison sent me, FBI agent. He's got what we need to bring price down, but we need your testimony on record. Everything you saw. Everything you know. Can you do that?" Kara's jaw set. "Hell yes, I can." Patricia moved to the window, keeping watch. "Make it fast. That guard's going to verify my story in about 3 minutes, and when he can't reach Dr. Reeves, things are going to get complicated." Evan hit record, held the phone steady. "State your name and badge number." "Detective Kara Vance, badge number 47239, Metro Police Narcotics Division." Her voice was stronger than her body, focused, like she'd been waiting for this moment. On October 15th, I was conducting an undercover operation investigating weapons trafficking. I had intelligence that Officer Daniel Price of Vice Division was facilitating the sale of confiscated weapons to criminal organizations. I observed Officer Price at approximately 7:20 a.m. delivering military-grade weapons to 3 unidentified males. When Price recognized me, he gave the order to open fire. I was shot 3 times. I would have died if not for the intervention of Evan Hale, a civilian who risked his life to pull me to safety. "Did you tell anyone about Price before the shooting?" "I told my supervisor, Lieutenant Sarah Chen. She said she'd look into it. 2 days later, Chen was transferred to another division and told me to drop the investigation. That's when I knew the corruption went higher than just Price." "Who else is involved?" "Detective Marcus Shaw is definitely dirty. He's been running interference since I woke up, trying to get me to recant my statement, threatening psychiatric evaluation if I keep talking. There are others. I don't have names yet, but the operation is too big for just 2 cops. Someone in the DA's office is protecting them. Maybe someone higher. Can you identify the men who shot you?" "I already did. Gave descriptions to a sketch artist before Shaw shut that down. The files are in my personal effects. Patricia has them." Patricia pulled a manila envelope from her pocket, handed it to Evan. Inside were police sketches, witness statements, everything Kara had managed to document before the cover-up began. "This is enough," Evan said. "More than enough." "Wait!" Kara's hand shot out, grabbed his wrist. Weak grip, but desperate. "There's something else. Price has a contact in the federal system, someone who's been blocking investigations. Morrison knows about it, but he doesn't know who. I got a name. Overheard Price talking to Shaw when they thought I was unconscious. She took a breath. Assistant Director James Kellerman, FBI. He's the one protecting the operation from federal investigation. The room went cold. Say that again, Evan said. James Kellerman. He's Morrison's boss, or close to it. High enough up that he's been killing warrants and redirecting investigations away from Price. Kara's eyes locked onto Evan's. If Morrison's planning to bring in FBI support, Kellerman will know about it. We'll shut it down. Might already know you're here. Footsteps in the hallway. Running. Tony's voice. Sir, you can't. The door burst open. Detective Shaw stood there with his weapon drawn and 3 uniforms behind him. Step away from the detective, Hale. Shaw's smile was pure predator. You're under arrest. Again. Though this time I don't think you're making it back to a cell. Evan's hand went to his waistband. The SIG was there. Easy reach. But 4 guns against 1 in a hospital room with a wounded cop and a civilian nurse. Bad odds. Worse outcomes. Easy, Shaw said. Don't make this harder than it has to be. We can do this clean or we can do this messy. Your choice. How'd you know I was here? Evan asked, though he already knew the answer. Morrison called it in, said you were planning to break Vance out, trying to flee the state. We got here just in time. Shaw's smile widened. He played you, Hale. Played you perfect. You really thought the FBI was going to help a fugitive? You're not that stupid. Except Evan had been exactly that stupid. Desperate and alone and willing to trust anyone who offered help. Morrison had seemed legitimate. The documents, the planning, the concern for Lily, all of it designed to get Evan exactly where Shaw needed him. Trapped, exposed, out of options. The files, Kara said quietly. Morrison has the transaction records. He's going to destroy them. Already done. Evidence room fire tonight. Terrible accident. Everything burned. Shaw gestured with his gun. Now. Hands where I can see them. Patricia, step away from the window. Nobody needs to get hurt. Well, nobody else. Evan raised his hand slowly. His phone was still recording, still capturing everything. But what good was a recording if Shaw took it, deleted it, disappeared it? Unless. Patricia, Evan said carefully. Did you get that email I sent you? Patricia looked confused. What email? The one I sent from the lobby. About 10 minutes ago. He kept his eyes on Shaw. You should check it. Might be important. Understanding dawned on Patricia's face. She hadn't received an email, but Evan had been holding his phone the whole time, recording. If he'd managed to hit send, if he'd uploaded the video somewhere before Shaw arrived. Don't move, Shaw snapped at Patricia, but she was already pulling out her phone. Shaw couldn't shoot her without cause. Not yet. Not in front of witnesses. Oh, Patricia said, looking at her screen. I did get an email from... Looks like it's already been forwarded to about 50 people, including Channel 7 News, the State Attorney General, and... She looked up. The FBI's Internal Affairs Division. Shaw's expression cracked, just for a second, long enough for Evan to see the panic underneath. You're lying. Am I? Evan asked. Way I figure it, Morrison might be dirty, but the Bureau's got honest people too. People who'd be real interested in a video of a decorated detective accusing cops of attempted murder. That's already out there, already spreading. You can shoot me, shoot Vance, shoot everyone in this room, but you can't stop what's already in motion. Shaw's gun hand wavered, just a fraction. Just enough for Evan to see the calculation happening behind those cold eyes. Shoot now and become proof of everything Kara had accused him of, or back off and try to salvage what was left of the cover-up. Neither option was good. Both were worse than Shaw had planned for. You're bluffing, Shaw said, but his voice had lost its edge. Maybe. Want to bet your career on it? Evan took a step forward. Shaw's gun came up, but Evan kept moving, slow and deliberate. Here's what I think happened. Morrison's dirty, sure, but he's not stupid. He knew I'd never trust him completely, so he gave me just enough truth mixed with lies to get me where you needed me. Except he didn't count on me recording everything. Didn't count on me having a backup plan. There's no backup plan. You're a mechanic playing soldier. You're out of your depth. Yeah, probably. But I learned a few things in my tours, like how to set up dead man switches, how to make sure information gets out even if I don't make it. Evan was close enough now to see sweat on Shaw's forehead. That video's uploading to cloud storage right now. Even if you take my phone, even if you kill everyone in this room, it's already out there. And in about... He glanced at his watch. 3 minutes. It auto-sends to every major news outlet in the state unless I stop it. It was a complete lie. Evan hadn't set up any dead man switch, hadn't uploaded anything. The video was still just on his phone, vulnerable and easily destroyed. But Shaw didn't know that, and the doubt in his eyes said he couldn't afford to gamble on whether Evan was telling the truth. The uniforms behind Shaw were looking uncertain now. Young cops who'd probably signed up to help people, not execute fugitives in hospital rooms. They were glancing at each other, at Shaw, trying to figure out what the hell was happening. "Sir," one of them said, "if there's video evidence, maybe we should—" "Shut up, Rodriguez." Shaw's voice cracked like a whip. "This man is a fugitive and a murderer. We have orders to bring him in by any means necessary." "Whose orders?" Kara's voice cut through the tension. She'd managed to sit up, pulling herself upright despite obvious pain. "Because my orders as a detective in this department are to investigate crimes and arrest criminals. And right now, the only criminal I see in this room is you, Shaw." "You're delirious, Vance. Head trauma. You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying. I know you tried to bury my investigation. I know you've been running interference for Price. I know you're dirty." She looked at the uniforms. "Rodriguez, Chen, you've both worked with me. You know I don't lie. You know I don't make shit up. So I'm telling you right now, Shaw is dirty. Price is dirty. And if you follow their orders, you're going to end up just as dirty as they are." The two uniforms, Rodriguez and Chen, exchanged another look. Their weapons had lowered slightly. Not much, but enough. Shaw saw it, saw his control slipping. His face went from pale to flushed, anger replacing calculation. "You're all making a huge mistake. Hale is wanted for murder. Vance is compromised. And if you don't follow orders right now, I'll have your badges." "Try it," a new voice said from the doorway. Everyone turned. A woman stood there in an FBI windbreaker, 50-something with steel-gray hair and an expression that suggested she'd dealt with men like Shaw her entire career and was thoroughly unimpressed. Behind her, 4 more agents in tactical gear, weapons ready but not aimed. Yet. "Special Agent in Charge Linda Vasquez," the woman said, holding up her credentials. "FBI Public Corruption Unit. Detective Shaw, I need you to lower your weapon and step away from Mr. Hale." Shaw didn't move. "This is a local matter. FBI has no jurisdiction. We have jurisdiction when it involves federal weapons trafficking, obstruction of justice, and attempted murder of a federal informant, which Detective Vance became the moment she contacted our office 2 hours ago." Vasquez stepped into the room. Her agents followed, covering angles with professional precision. "We've been monitoring this hospital since we received intelligence about a potential attempt on Detective Vance's life. So far tonight, we've recorded you threatening a witness, entering a hospital room with drawn weapons, and attempting to arrest a man who's been cooperating with a federal investigation." "Cooperating? He's a fugitive. He's under federal protection, has been since he contacted Agent Morrison 6 hours ago." Vasquez's smile was sharp. "Yes, we know about Morrison. We know he's been trying to sabotage our investigation. We know he fed you information about Hale's location. And we know you fell for it. Because while you were here waving guns around, my team was executing warrants on Officer Price, Detective Shaw's personal residence, and every location connected to this weapons trafficking operation. We have servers, we have documents, we have witness statements. And now, thanks to Mr. Hale's video, we have your confession on record." The color drained from Shaw's face. He looked at Evan, at his phone, at the realization that he'd been played harder than he'd ever played anyone else. "That's impossible. Morrison said exactly what we told him to say. He's been working with us for 3 weeks, ever since we picked him up on unrelated charges and offered him a deal. Funny thing about dirty agents, they flip fast when they realize they're looking at 20 years in federal prison." Vasquez gestured to her team. "Detective Shaw, Officer Rodriguez, Officer Chen, weapons on the floor, now." Rodriguez and Chen complied immediately. Shaw held out for another 5 seconds, his hands shaking, his eyes wild with the kind of panic that came from watching your entire world collapse in real time. Then his gun clattered to the floor and he sagged against the wall. "This is wrong," he muttered. "This is all wrong." We were protecting the city, keeping weapons off the streets. The money was just... It was just compensation for the risk. Save it for your lawyer, Vasquez said. She looked at Evan. Mr. Hale, I'm sorry for what you've been through. The charges against you are being dropped as we speak. You're free to go. Evan stood there trying to process what had just happened. Free to go, just like that. After 2 weeks of hell, after breaking out of jail, after killing a man and running from the police and thinking he'd never see his daughter again. Free to go. Morrison, he said. Is he really? Agent Morrison is currently in federal custody providing testimony against Assistant Director Kellerman and 6 other individuals connected to this operation. He was never supposed to meet you tonight. That was all part of Shaw's plan, but we knew Shaw would try something, so we let it play out while my team worked the real operation. Vasquez pulled out a tablet, showed him a screen. This is the raid on Price's safe house. Happened 40 minutes ago. Price is in custody along with 3 associates. We recovered approximately $2 million in cash and enough weapons to supply a small army. The screen showed tactical footage, flashbangs, shouting, men in tactical gear breaching a door, Daniel Price face down on expensive carpet with his hands zip-tied behind his back. All of it professional, clean, the kind of operation that required weeks of planning and perfect execution. How long have you been watching? Evan asked. Since Detective Vance first contacted our office 3 months ago. She was working with us long before the shooting. The undercover operation that morning was supposed to build evidence against Price. When it went sideways, when she almost died, we knew we had to move faster. But we also knew Shaw and his people would be watching, so we waited. Let them think they were winning. Let them commit to their cover-up. And then you came along and gave us exactly the catalyst we needed. I'm not a catalyst. I'm a mechanic who tried to help someone. You're a veteran who risked everything to do the right thing. There's a difference. Vasquez closed her tablet. Your daughter's safe, by the way. The agents watching your sister-in-law's house are legitimate. I made sure of it personally. And your public defender, Rachel Cortez, has been notified of all charges being dropped. She's already filed paperwork for your immediate release. Evan felt something unknot in his chest, something that had been tight and painful for 2 weeks. Lily was safe. He was free. The nightmare was ending. But people had died. That woman at the apartment, Maria Santos. The man Evan had shot. All the collateral damage of a conspiracy that had valued money over lives. What about everyone else? He asked. The people who got hurt because of this. We're working on it. Victim compensation, witness protection for anyone who testified, full investigation into every case that Price and Shaw touched. It's going to take months. Maybe years, but we're committed to making it right. Vasquez paused. It won't bring anyone back, won't undo the damage, but it's something. It was something, had to be enough. The agents processed Shaw and the 2 uniforms, reading them rights, putting them in cuffs. Rodriguez was crying. Chen looked shell-shocked. Shaw just stared at the floor, his face blank, already retreating to whatever mental space corrupt cops went when their world ended. Kara was talking to one of the FBI agents, giving her statement, her voice tired but determined. She caught Evan's eye, nodded, a whole conversation in that single gesture. Thanks for saving my life. Thanks for believing me. Thanks for being exactly the kind of person who runs toward danger instead of away from it. Evan nodded back. They'd probably never be friends. Their lives didn't overlap beyond this one nightmare, but they'd both survived. Both made it through. That counted for something. Patricia Chen was being interviewed by another agent, explaining her role, how she'd helped Kara, how she'd let Evan into the hospital. She looked nervous, but not guilty. A civilian who'd done her best in an impossible situation. You should get checked out, Vasquez said to Evan. You've been running on adrenaline for days. Crash is coming. I need to see my daughter first. Understood. We'll arrange transport upstate. Get you to your sister-in-law's place. After that, take some time. Rest. Figure out your life. The Bureau will need your testimony eventually, but that can wait. Evan thanked her and walked out of the room. The hallway was full of agents and cops and hospital staff trying to figure out what was happening. He ignored them all, took the elevator down to the first floor, walked out through the main entrance into cold night air that tasted like freedom. Titan was waiting in the stolen Civic, his nose pressed against the window. The dog went insane when he saw Evan, tail wagging so hard it shook the entire car. Evan opened the door and got bowled over by 80 pounds of pure joy. "I know, boy, I know. It's over. We're okay." He stood there in the parking lot with his dog, breathing cold air, feeling the weight of 2 weeks drain out of his body. His hands were shaking. His legs felt weak. The adrenaline was fading and exhaustion was rushing in to fill the gap. But he was free. He was alive. And he was going to see his daughter. The drive upstate took 3 hours. FBI provided a proper vehicle instead of the stolen Civic, which Evan was grateful for since grand theft auto charges would have been a terrible irony after everything else. An agent named Martinez drove while Evan sat in back with Titan and tried not to fall asleep. His body wanted to shut down, wanted to process trauma and stress and violence. But he couldn't, not yet. Not until he saw Lily. Rebecca's house was a small colonial in a neighborhood where people mowed their lawns and knew their neighbors, and the biggest crime was probably teenagers drinking in the woods. The kind of place Evan had always thought was too boring, too safe, too far removed from anything real. Now it looked like paradise. The FBI agents who'd been watching the house met Martinez at the curb. Quick debrief. No incidents. Nobody had approached. Lily was inside, asleep. Probably. It was past midnight. "Want us to come in?" Martinez asked. "Make sure your sister-in-law understands the situation?" "No, I got it. Thanks." Evan walked up to the front door with Titan beside him, rang the bell, waited. Footsteps inside. The porch light came on. The door opened a crack, security chain still in place. Rebecca's face appeared in the gap. She looked older than Evan remembered, tired, scared. Then she saw him, and her expression went through about 6 different emotions in 2 seconds. "Evan, what the hell? They said you escaped." "Charges were dropped. All of them. I'm clear. It's over." "What do you mean it's over? You were on the news. They said you killed someone." "I'll explain everything. But right now I just need to see Lily. Please." Rebecca stared at him for a long moment, trying to decide if this was real or some kind of trick or delusion. Then she closed the door, undid the chain, opened it wide. "She's in the guest room. She cried herself to sleep about an hour ago. Wouldn't talk to me, wouldn't eat, just kept asking when you were coming home." Guilt hit Evan like a physical blow. His daughter. His responsibility. And he'd put her through hell because he'd tried to do the right thing. Because he'd been the kind of person who ran toward danger instead of keeping his head down and protecting his own. But if he hadn't, Kara would be dead. Price and Shaw would still be running weapons. The corruption would have continued spreading. Sometimes doing the right thing cost more than you wanted to pay. Didn't make it wrong, just made it hard. He climbed the stairs, found the guest room, door slightly ajar. Nightlight casting soft shadows across a bed where his daughter lay, curled up under blankets, her face pressed into a pillow that was probably damp with tears. Evan sat on the edge of the bed, put his hand on her shoulder. "Lily. Hey, it's me." She jerked awake, scrambled upright, stared at him like she was seeing a ghost. Then she launched herself at him hard enough to knock him backward. Her arms went around his neck, her face buried in his shoulder. And she started crying. Not the quiet tears of a kid trying to be strong, the full-body sobs of someone who'd been holding on too tight for too long and finally had permission to let go. "Dad! Dad! They said you did bad things. I knew you didn't. I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, baby." Evan held her tight, one hand on her back, one in her hair, feeling her shake against him. "It's okay now. It's all okay. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. You promise?" "I promise." Titan jumped onto the bed, adding his weight to the reunion. Lily laughed through her tears, one hand reaching for the dog while the other stayed locked around Evan's neck. The 3 of them stayed like that for a long time, just existing in the same space, alive, together, safe. Eventually, Lily pulled back. Her face was red and wet and beautiful. "What happened?" "Long story. I'll tell you all of it. But the short version is I helped someone who needed help. Some bad people tried to make me look guilty, and some good people figured out the truth. The bad people are going to jail. I'm cleared. We can go home." "When?" "Soon. Few days maybe. Need to talk to some lawyers and FBI agents first. Clean up the mess. But soon. Okay. She wiped her face with her sleeve. Dad, you did the right thing, helping that cop. I know it was scary, but you did the right thing. Mom would have been proud. Evan felt his throat close up, heard Sarah's voice in his head. You spent 3 tours fighting other people's battles. Now you need to fight your own. Except it hadn't been his own battle. It had been Kara's and Angela's, and every person who'd been hurt by the corruption that Price and Shaw represented. But by fighting it, by refusing to back down even when it would have been easier, Evan had somehow become the person Sarah had always believed he could be. Yeah, he said quietly. I think she would have been. They stayed at Rebecca's for 3 days. The FBI needed statements. Rachel needed to file paperwork. The press needed to be managed. Evan's face was all over the news, but now the story was shifting from dangerous fugitive to wrongly accused hero. He hated that almost as much as the original coverage. He wasn't a hero, just a guy who'd made the only choice he could live with. Kara was released from the hospital after 2 days. She called Evan from a burner phone, her voice still weak but determined. How are you holding up? She asked. Better than I probably should be. You? Docs say I'll need physical therapy for the leg. Might have a limp, but I'm alive, so I'll take it. A pause. I heard you got your daughter back. Yeah, she's good. Tough kid. Sounds like her father. Another pause. Hale, I don't know how to thank you. You saved my life multiple times. You risked everything. You would have done the same. Maybe, but you actually did it. That matters. She cleared her throat. The department's a mess right now. Internal Affairs is investigating everyone who worked with Shaw. A lot of people are going to lose their jobs. But there are still good cops here. People who want to do the job right. I'm going to make sure they get a chance. You're staying? After everything? Hell yes, I'm staying. This is my city, my department. I'm not letting Price and Shaw and all the other corrupt bastards win by making me leave. I'm going to fix this. Might take years, but I'm going to fix it. Evan smiled. You're going to be a pain in everyone's ass, aren't you? Count on it. They talked for a few more minutes, exchanged contact information, promised to stay in touch even though they both knew they probably wouldn't. Their lives didn't intersect beyond this one nightmare, but the connection was there. The knowledge that when it had mattered most, they'd both chosen to fight instead of run. On the 4th day, Evan and Lily went home. The FBI had cleaned up his apartment, removed the crime scene tape, returned his belongings, even fixed the door frame that had been damaged during the search. It looked almost normal, almost like the life they'd had before everything exploded. Titan immediately claimed his spot by the radiator. Lily went to her room, started putting posters back on the wall. Evan stood in the kitchen where 2 weeks ago he'd been making pancakes and thinking about ordinary mornings. His phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer. Then he recognized the area code as federal. Hale? It's Agent Vasquez. Wanted to give you an update. I'm listening. Price is cooperating. Gave us names of 17 other individuals involved in the trafficking operation. We're executing warrants across 3 states. It's going to be one of the biggest corruption cases in the Bureau's history. She paused. Shaw's still not talking, lawyered up. But we've got enough evidence without his testimony. Kellerman's already resigned. Morrison's looking at reduced charges in exchange for continued cooperation. The whole thing's unraveling. Good. There's something else. We found records of Price's transactions going back 5 years. Wire transfers. Payments. Names of people he was buying protection from. One of those names was Lieutenant Sarah Chen, the supervisor who transferred Vance and told her to drop the investigation. We're bringing her in for questioning this afternoon. Evan processed that. More arrests, more people facing consequences. The system slowly correcting itself. It wouldn't bring back the dead. Wouldn't undo the damage. But it was something. Thanks for letting me know, he said. You earned it. Hale, I meant what I said at the hospital. You did good work. If you ever want a job with the Bureau, call me. We could use someone with your instincts. I'm a mechanic. You're a lot more than that. But offer stands. She hung up. Evan put the phone down, looked around his kitchen, at the flour still sitting on the counter from 2 weeks ago, at the pancake recipe he'd been trying to remember, at the ordinary life that had been interrupted by violence and corruption and all the things he'd tried to leave behind when he'd left the service. Lily appeared in the doorway. "Dad, can we have pancakes for dinner?" "Yeah, baby, we can have pancakes." He pulled out the bowl. Measured flour, added eggs and milk. His hands moved through familiar motions, but his mind was somewhere else, thinking about Kara in her hospital bed, about Price in a federal cell, about Shaw and Morrison and all the other people who'd chosen wrong and were now paying for it. Thinking about Sarah, about the promise he'd made to her, about being the kind of father Lily deserved. He'd killed a man 2 weeks ago, had broken out of jail, had stolen a car and threatened people and done all kinds of things that the old Evan would have done without hesitation, but the new Evan had sworn never to do again. And he'd do it all over if he had to, because some things were worth fighting for. Some people were worth saving, and sometimes being a good man meant getting your hands dirty. The pancakes turned out pretty good, not as good as Sarah's, but close. Lily ate 3 of them, talking between bites about school and Rebecca's house and the new game Titan had learned. Normal conversation, the kind families had when they weren't running from corrupt cops or fighting for their lives. After dinner, Evan sat on the couch with Lily curled up against his side and Titan sprawled across his feet. The TV was on, but he wasn't watching it, just sitting, breathing, being present in a moment that 2 weeks ago he'd thought he'd never have again. His phone buzzed, text message from a number he didn't recognize. "Heard you made it out alive. Proud of you, brother. Stay safe. Curtis." Evan smiled. The guy from his cell, the one who'd helped create the distraction that had made his escape possible. Curtis was still locked up, still facing his own charges. But he'd taken time to send a message, to let Evan know he was thinking about him. Evan texted back, "Thanks. I owe you one." The response came immediately. "You don't owe me shit. Just be a good dad to that girl. That's payment enough." Simple advice, the kind that cut through all the complexity and trauma and got to the heart of what actually mattered. Be a good dad. Show up. Do the work. Love your kid and try not to screw up too badly. Evan could do that. Had been doing it. Would keep doing it. 3 months later, on a cold January morning, Evan stood in a courtroom watching Daniel Price get sentenced to 27 years in federal prison. Shaw got 18. Lieutenant Sarah Chen got 12. Morrison got 5 with 3 suspended in exchange for testimony. 17 other defendants faced their own trials, their own reckonings. Kara was there, walking with a slight limp but otherwise recovered. She'd been promoted to sergeant, was leading a new anti-corruption task force, making good on her promise to fix the department from the inside. After the sentencing, they met outside the courthouse. The press was there, cameras rolling, reporters shouting questions. Evan ignored them all, focused on Kara. "You okay?" he asked. "Getting there. You?" "Same." They stood there in the cold, 2 people who'd survived something most people couldn't even imagine. The story was already fading from the news cycle. Other scandals, other crises. The world moved on whether you were ready or not. "I'm thinking about writing a book," Kara said, "about all this, the investigation, the shooting, how corruption works. Might help other departments avoid the same problems." "You should. People need to know." "Would you be okay with me including your part? The rescue. Everything you did?" Evan thought about it. About seeing his story in print. About Lily reading it someday. About whether he wanted to be remembered as the guy who broke out of jail and fought corruption, or just as a mechanic who did what needed doing and moved on. "Yeah," he said finally. "Just get the details right, and maybe leave out the part where I stole a car." Kara laughed. "Deal." They shook hands, parted ways. Evan went home to his daughter and his dog, and his garage where old man Barrett's Dodge was still waiting to be fixed. Normal life, ordinary problems. The kind of existence he'd fought to get back. 6 months after that, on a warm summer evening, Evan was closing up the garage when Kara's patrol car pulled up. She got out, no longer limping, looking healthy and strong and every inch the cop she'd always been meant to be. "Hale, got a minute?" "Sure. What's up?" "We're starting a community outreach program. Teaching self-defense and emergency response to civilians. I want you to help. Couple hours a week. Show people how to stay safe, how to help others when things go wrong." "I'm not a teacher." You're a veteran with tactical training who saved a cop's life. That makes you more qualified than most. She leaned against her car. Plus, we're partnering with the VA, helping veterans transition to civilian life. You could make a real difference. Evan looked at her, at the genuine hope in her eyes, at the opportunity to turn all the violence and trauma of his past into something useful, something that might actually help people instead of hurt them. Couple hours a week? That's it. No commitment beyond that. Try it out. See if it fits. Okay, I'll try it. Kara grinned. Knew you'd say yes. Class starts next Tuesday, 6 p.m., Community Center on 5th Street. Don't be late. She drove off. Evan stood there in the fading sunlight, thinking about the choices that had brought him here. The morning he'd run toward gunfire instead of away. The decision to help Kara instead of protecting himself. The refusal to back down even when everyone said he should. Those choices had cost him, had put him through hell, had nearly destroyed everything he cared about. But they'd also made him into someone his daughter could be proud of, someone Sarah would have recognized, someone who used his skills to build instead of destroy. That night, Evan made dinner, spaghetti this time, not pancakes, and told Lily about Kara's offer. His daughter listened with that serious expression she got when she was really thinking about something. You should do it, she said finally. You're good at helping people. Yeah? Yeah, it's like what you did for that cop. But you get to keep doing it. Keep being the person who helps instead of the person who walks away. Out of the mouths of 9-year-olds. Wisdom wrapped in simple observation. You're pretty smart, you know that? Evan said. I get it from you. She smiled. Well, and from Mom. But you too. They finished dinner, did dishes together, watched a movie with Titan sprawled across the couch, taking up more space than two humans combined. Normal evening, nothing special. Just a father and daughter living their lives, one ordinary day at a time. Later, after Lily was asleep, Evan stood at her bedroom door watching her breathe, thinking about how close he'd come to losing this, to becoming just another statistic, another broken veteran who couldn't navigate civilian life, another name in a case file that would get closed and forgotten. But he'd made it through. Survived. Kept fighting when it would have been easier to quit. And tomorrow he'd wake up and make breakfast and fix cars and live his life. Maybe he'd teach that community class. Maybe he'd help other people learn to protect themselves. Maybe he'd find new ways to use his skills that didn't involve violence or trauma. Or maybe he'd just be a mechanic, a father, a guy with a dog and a daughter and a small apartment in a neighborhood that had nearly destroyed him but couldn't quite finish the job. Either way, he was alive. He was free. He was home. And that was enough. Titan padded up beside him, pressed his bulk against Evan's leg. The dog looked up with those steady eyes that had seen everything, forgiven everything, and stayed loyal through it all. Come on, boy, Evan whispered. Let's get some sleep. Big day tomorrow. They walked to Evan's room together. Titan claimed his spot at the foot of the bed. Evan lay down and stared at the ceiling, listening to his daughter breathe in the next room, feeling his dog's weight against his feet, existing in this moment of peace that had been bought with blood and courage and stubborn refusal to give up. Outside, the city went on, sirens in the distance, cars passing, life continuing whether you were ready or not. But inside this small apartment, everything was quiet, safe. Right. Evan closed his eyes and slept without nightmares for the first time in 2 weeks. The next morning, he woke up to Lily shaking his shoulder and Titan licking his face and sunlight streaming through the windows like a promise that today would be better than yesterday. Dad, you're going to be late opening the garage. I'm up. Can we have pancakes? Yeah, baby. We can have pancakes. He got out of bed, followed his daughter to the kitchen, started mixing batter while she set the table and Titan watched hopefully for any dropped food. The same routine they'd had before the nightmare. The same small rituals that made life worth living. Except now Evan understood their value. Understood what it meant to have ordinary mornings and simple choices and the freedom to just exist without fear. He'd fought for this, bled for it, nearly died for it. And looking at his daughter smile as he flipped the first pancake, watching her feed scraps to the dog when she thought he wasn't looking, hearing her laugh at something stupid Titan did, it had all been worth it. Every scar, every nightmare, Every moment of terror and doubt and pain. Worth it. Because she was safe. They were together. And tomorrow he'd wake up and do it all over again. One ordinary day at a time.